Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tetracast. My name is Brian Vitale, and we've got a jam-packed episode, and I've got a whole bunch of people here to talk about it. Who knew that the end of February was going to be a rock slide of RPG news? In the last week, so much stuff has come up, some that we were expecting and some that we weren't. Anyways, let's just bulldoze right into it. Joining me today, I've got George Foster.
Hello, everyone.
I've got Joshua Torres.
Every single RPG property had something to say this week. Every single one.
We've got James Galizio.
Didn't hear about any Atelier news this week, so I don't know.
There was actually Atelier news from the Twitter showing off the new content and the DX things.
I stand corrected. Or corrected.
You tried. And also joining us today, we've got Alex Seedhouse.
Happy Pokemon Day, everybody.
Alex Seedhouse is a friend of the site, so it's cool to have him on board to talk all things Pokemon, which obviously was a major constituent of the week of news. But before we get into Pokemon and Final Fantasy and BioWare, before we get into any of that, we're going to put it on the back burner and instead do what we always do and talk about what we've been playing. Because we also have had a few games released in the last 7 days as well, on top of news. Obviously, Persona 5 Strikers came out, I believe, last Tuesday, with some early access if you bought specific editions. And then Bravely Default 2 released just a day or so ago. Obviously, a lot of us have been diving headfirst into that. So who wants to go first? Fight over it.
Alex, let's talk about Bravely Default 2.
Oh, throw me at the deep end.
That's right. They're really going to go straight into it. You've been reviewing it for your site, Nintendo Insider. How far are you right now?
So I've played for about 70 hours.
70, 7-0. Not 17.
70.
Okay.
No.
All right.
I beat it after around 60 hours, which was, I think, last weekend. There's one job for me to unlock. I guess saying there's a post game is not particular spoiler territory. People probably be happy that there is. So there's one job left to unlock. I enjoyed the last 2/3 of it, but the first third is quite rough because there are some horrendous difficulty spikes with the asterisk bosses that you fight. So once you're kind of past that first third, it starts to ease up because you get more jobs. You can try and switch up your party in terms of strategies and things like that. So I think people will, I play RPGs less regularly than you guys do, but I played the last two Bravely games on 3DS. So I was looking forward to this one and sinking all that time into it. I just hope that people don't play the first third and think, what's this? And they hit those sort of difficulty spikes and really struggle. I think one of the bosses took me like 4 or 5 hours to get past, just persevering and just doing it over and over again. But obviously, I don't know how much you want me to talk about it at this point, or if it's going to be so we move on to again later.
Well, yeah. I mean, everyone's been, if they didn't get an early review copy, obviously they're kind of starting out. Like, I'll talk about my experience because I didn't get an early review copy. I bought this, and I
don't know how far you're into it so far.
Right now, I'm about like 8.5 hours into it at the desert area, like the second town that you're in, and
okay.
I've been doing it in hard mode because I'm like, oh, sure, why not?
It put me to shame.
No, it's tough. No, definitely, it is rough. Like early game, like you said, it's like I've had to, like right now, I'm kind of grinding like people's jobs and like because there's certain passives on each job tree. You level jobs in this game.
Final Fantasy V, baby.
Yep. And at certain levels, you either get like an active skill or a passive skill that you can set. So right now, you get your. It was nice to like have that old timey JRPG like pace to it. Like at the very beginning, you're just this main character that you can name, but his default name is Seth, and you kind of get washed up. It's kind of like almost like an East style, type beginning where you just get shipwrecked and then you're washed up in the sea.
What do you think of What do you think of Elvis so far? Because obviously a lot of the voices and everything are quite UK orientated. So like Elvis is Scottish.
Elvis, like yeah, but when they because this is one of those weird games where you're kind of pushed or forced to listen to the English dub for a bit before you can switch voices from the small time I played with the English voices. I liked the English voices, but I just wanted to because I'm the type of person that's like I'd rather hear the Japanese track go for these kind of games because that's just the type of player I am. But generally, I lied. I didn't think any of the voices felt out of place. I think the biggest voice change that really affected me from English to Japanese voice was the main character Seth's voice. He sounds much more mature and deep voiced in the Japanese dub of the game, which really surprised me because he kind of has a softer tone in English dub, which is it's weird.
And there's Dag as well, who's one of the asterisk holders in the prologue, I think. He's Australian. So there's always weird accents going on in this game. So yeah, it's just a bit of a wild game in terms of the different regions they go to. But I don't know if it's because Xenoblade games, I think early on were all sort of done by Nintendo of Europe. Well, not Nintendo Europe, sorry. Yes, I'm getting mixed up, thinking Square Enix. In terms of Bravely and all that kind of stuff. But they were all sort of a mixture of sort of European accents and things. And the English.
Well, I like how they did in Xenoblade 2. I don't think it landed as strongly, and I don't want to get too much on a tangent, but I do think it was interesting how they we're going to localize this into English. Why don't we have each of the Titans in Xenoblade 2 Gormat is Welsh and Morardain is Scottish. They actually kind of made it so that in game, if a person speaks like this, they're from a certain place, using the English voices to do that. It wasn't always perfect, but there was some thought behind it that I thought was pretty clever. Going back to Bravely Default, it's interesting that you say that it's rough in the beginning but gets stronger at the end, because I haven't played the initial game, but isn't that kind of on its head from how the reception of the initial game was?
Well, it's just because obviously it had the 2 demos before the game came out, and the first one I think was it a year ago or something like that. The main criticism was obviously the difficulty, and then when it came back in another direct, I think, or something, they said how they'd used all that feedback to sort of shape the experience. So going into the final game, I've largely played it on normal difficulty, so I've not completely cheaped out from hard mode. But the thing
is there an easy mode?
There is a casual difficulty, and my issue with it is that as you get to sort of, particularly it has a sort of dip where the first third is quite difficult because of the lack of job breadth that you have. Then you're all right because you start unlocking things, and there are certain attacks that certain jobs, which I don't want to talk about what it is specifically because I don't want to ruin when certain things are unlocked for people, but there is a certain job that has an attack that pretty much lets you beat bosses quite quickly, because you deal initial damage and then a few turns go by, and then that attack that you did causes more damage after a few turns. So if you do 4 brave attacks and then do that, to a boss character with a lot of HP, you can quickly deal quite a lot of damage because you deal 5-6k damage initially per attack, and then the same amount of damage a few turns later. So if you do that 4 times, you're pretty much wiping out half the health bar quite quickly. But then you get the kind of, it eases off, and then obviously the back half of the game and the post game gets quite difficult, because then you have bosses that are much trickier to deal with, and those sort of tricks that you learn to rely on in kind of the middle part of it start to
be less effective.
Unravel. Yeah, so you then have to think, oh god, right, I've been doing that now for part of the game. What do I do now? And I've started jumbling jobs around, what people are looking forward from this game. That's quite unique to it.
To clarify for people when you're talking about brave attacks, the whole conceit of the Bravely Default games, just fundamentally is in these turn-based battles, you can actually borrow your turn from future turns up to 3 additional times. So you're basically giving up your action in the next subsequent 3 turns that your character would have to attack all at once or do all these actions all at once for this turn at the cost of like skipping your future turns, essentially.
Yeah, and obviously when you have a 4-party character throughout the game, they all quite conveniently meet each other early on without much drama, and then team up. But yeah, I mean, you typically use, you have your offensive characters, your support characters. So, I have obviously Sony who primarily heals the party and tries and prevents them from being wiped out. But then obviously characters such as, this mystery job that I won't tell everyone, with the attack that I use to primarily deal damage to people. So you can brave to take up to 4 turns at once. So use your current turn and then up to 3 turns more if you want to. Or you can default, so that means that you sort of bank a turn without having a sort of penalty. So you can take 1 turn to default, which also you defend. So obviously you're expecting an attack to come in. I mean, the standard enemies are quite easy to sort of like rinse through. I never really had much difficulty with that. But that was also another issue that I had with the game. So when you get into a dungeon, I don't know how many of them you've been through so far, maybe 1 or 2. There are a fair few of them in the game, but my experience with it, you go through the dungeon, you'll go into obviously the enemies. There's sort of like 3 states that they have. One is that they see you. I think it's like I haven't had much experience with Dragon Quest, but Dragon Quest, you kind of see them around, so you can kind of run into them and attack them and all that kind of stuff. If they see you, they run at you, and then you start a battle and all that kind of stuff. Or you can swing your sword at them, and if you creep up behind them and try and start a battle with an extra brave point. But the way the game works is that based on your party level and general strength, I don't know what it's based on, equipment, weapons level, job level, God knows. But if you're deemed to be a high level, when the enemies see you, they sort of you get some sort of like sweat like on the brow icon appears, and they run away from you.
They get nervous.
Yeah,
and then so that indicates obviously that you're relatively strong for the area you're in. And then if they have sort of like a red kind of cloudy mist around them, that means that they are stronger than what you're at currently. So you have that visual sort of cue as to how that battle will go if you try and get near that enemy.
and this is a big contrast from from previous Bravely Default games, because they were based on random encounters, and you can actually have this toggle in the options that says, hey, you can actually just turn off no encounters if you don't want to do it, or crank it up if you have grinding going.
Yeah, so I mean, there's no options like that on this, which I thought, okay, fine, maybe they couldn't do that. But it's weird in the post game though, because obviously all the enemies are just running away from you all the time. So it's a bit of a weird experience. But in the dungeons particularly though, obviously most of those, I think most of them, if not all of them, end with a boss fight, as most people expect. But you'll run through the dungeon and all the enemies will be running away from you. So you think, oh, I've got a pretty strong party. And then you get to that boss fight and then you get wiped out within like,
the bosses
2-3 turns.
are definitely...
And you think, what? So there's a lot of instances where the game seems to like indicate to you that your party is strong and you're okay. This area is a breeze. Push forward. But then you sort of hit that difficulty spike wall, which is usually obviously the Asterisk boss fight. That was a bit frustrating because then you then think, oh wow, am I just bad at video games? Maybe I should stop playing RPGs.
I feel that.
But you said it eases up as you go on a bit.
Yeah, so it's not. I mean, I probably sound quite negative about this whole experience at this point, but I have really enjoyed my time with Brave Default 2. It just has these sort of very roller coaster wave of emotions playing it, where after that first third, which I think roughly is after chapter 1, that's the part that starts to even out because you have a bit more breadth to play around with. And there are a lot of story beats, which of course I won't spoil, but that happen, as you progress through the game beyond that point, that are really interesting.
There are
direction.
there were several things, that I really appreciate about this game, because it feels like a very classic era Square Enix RPG from the get go. Like when I was talking about, like, you kind of wake up and you're from this beach, and you're kind of like within the first hour and a half, I was already in the middle of the first dungeon with like almost a full party, and that's something that, like, I wish more RPGs had these days, where the ramp up to like being able to play the game didn't take so long, because a lot of RPGs is like, hey, there's a 2-hour beginning and you're barely taking control of your character. It's like, look, man, I just want to start playing the game, and I
Looking
really
at
like
you, Persona 4.
and I really like that this game, like, is kind of like, okay, here's this character, you're kind of introduced to these characters, you meet your first two characters like within the first 15-20 minutes. This is how the battles work, and it's like, it's the tutorials don't feel overbearing. There are tutorial tips, obviously front loaded, but it doesn't feel overbearing in this game. And then you're obviously, like, as CD mentioned, you won't really get to play around with the jobs for, like, for a bit, but once you get there, it becomes fun. Like right now, my setup for what like two of my characters are, they're like vanguard classes. They can tank a lot of hits. They have like this armor, and they have like this like part of the armor stats, part of your equipment stats is like chance of being targeted plus X, plus a value, which affects AI behavior, and like being able to target them more often than your more squishy party members. And then from other jobs that they were in, like they both went through Black Mage and White Mage, I got them passives that not only amp up their attack every time they attack from their trees, but they also drain health and drain MP for every hit that they do. So they're just basically tanking hits, and every time they hit, they're just restoring all that health. And they also have White Mage as their subclasses, because in this game you can equip up to 2 jobs. So that means you can the second job that you equip as a sub job, you have access to all their skills that they've learned as well. So these are basically 2 effectively paladin classes that tank hits and absorb health and MP, as well as being able to cure and restore that MP if they need it, which is really effective. And I really enjoyed that aspect of customization to it so far. And
It'll be interesting to really see like the meta evolve from this game. Like we also saw it a bit with Octopath Traveler, when like there was some crazy shit you could do with what's her name, Tressa's like item using job, and combined it with like spell casting to do some real wacky overpowered stuff. It'd be interesting to see like what people land on in terms of like combinations that you might have not expected that end up being like incredibly efficient or like overpowered. And I think these games, they definitely shouldn't try to look for like perfect balance. They should allow certain combinations to be like honestly a bit OP or whatever. And then it's the discovering what works, and what works really well can end up being kind of a bit of a gameplay aspect in its own right.
That's the cool thing about this game, is that I know a lot of people, especially Colin, our reviewer, who wrote a fantastic review on the site, very in depth. He went
Go read it.
Yeah, him and CD just put in a lot.
He played it for 75 hours, I think. So he's got CD beat.
He's done more than I have. The last job I haven't unlocked yet. Again, that is more. I've tried that boss probably 50 times, and I was like, right, I can't do this yet, so I've gone away to do other stuff and then gone back to that.
Yeah, but I know that.
I know he's sort of done everything he possibly can in this game, which I have not yet.
I know when Cullen wrote his preview about like that listicle of like the 4 things he liked, 2 things he was kind of mixed on. Like one of the mixed on things was the equipment load for each class, because as you take on a job, they have this equipment load stat on them, and you can only equip a certain amount of like equipment. You can't go like all out with them, because if you go over that equipment burden, it'll drastically reduce the stats for that character. And so you have to make strategic decisions of how much you're willing to equip, or like what are the best ways you can optimize your equipment to best make use of the burden that you're given. Like for the Vanguard class that I mentioned, they have a huge equip load, so I just put a lot of equipment on them that increases their physical defense as well as their chance of being targeted stat, Meanwhile, like the squishy ones, like the white mage and the black mage, I'm like they have low equipment burdens, but they have equipment that can dish out and add on to the restorative power or magical power. But you also have to be worried about, okay, I have to give up them having like good physical defense, because if I put on this armor that gives them a lot of physical defense, it'll add on not only a lot of equipment load but also the chance of being targeted stats on them. So you kind of have to accept that these classes will be squishier inherently and whatnot, and you're hoping that like you're able to skew the stats and manipulate the stats enough for the AI to target your vanguards instead, and for them to take the aggro. And I kind of, oddly enough, I kind of like that equipment load stat, because you're kind of forced to make strategic decisions and not always going for like the best thing or the most ideal thing possible for them. It's kind of it's more of a checks and balances chemistry that they have.
It prevents armor from being just like straight upgrades all the time. Like, oh, this is better. The old gear is useless now forever and ever.
Yeah, you can get a more powerful weapon on paper, but the game itself, the balancing of the actual weight of the equipment. I mean, just for anyone who's kind of listening to that and thinks, like me as a filthy casual, thinks, oh my god, what the hell? Do I have to do all that? There is like a button that you can just hit on the equipment screen to equip recommended, based on what you have in your inventory. Hit the button, it just chooses it for you. So I understood the kind of weight bearing, in the sense that the heaviest characters in battle are the ones that draw the most sort of aggro from whatever you're fighting. But obviously the ones with the lowest weight would not get attacked as much, but if they did get a hit, they would obviously take more damage because they don't have a strong armor or whatever.
And there are like a good amount of like enemies even this early on in the game that like hit all your party members. So
yeah, and it gets worse.
Yeah, so just like, oh man, and it's also cool too, because you have to think about like the attributes of your enemies. Like when I was talking about like that life leech and MP leech, if I hit enemies that are undead, it'll have the opposite effect on them, because they're undead. You're not really leeching life; you're just hurting yourself because of their.
That's a cool interaction.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Before I forget, I wanted to also mention that when you were talking about like how the enemy encounters work in this game and how you can actually see them on the map and how they run away from you, it's kind of a weird neat thing that you can manipulate, is because if you initiate a battle and there are other enemies around them, it'll like highlight them in a blue aura and basically signifying to you that you take on all these enemies at once, but they come in reinforcement waves. So after you take out the first reinforcement wave, the next enemy wave comes in and whatnot. So you can kind of like finesse the running away systems. They don't really disappear. You can just like have them like run against the wall right by each other, and you initiate that battle.
Back them into a corner.
Yeah, and it doesn't actually. Like early on, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
Yeah. I'm just saying that the bonus for doing this is that there's a big job point bonus for taking on these consecutive waves of enemies. So it's really like a really not going to say the most intuitive way, but a really neat way to kind of grind more efficiently, I guess, for those job points. Sorry, go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, the game, as you progress, will make that simpler for you. So there are items that you can get and eventually buy that when you use them, the items are all for the different, I think they call them families. So type of enemy you're facing. So it's like humanoid, insects, beasts, undead, stuff like that. So if you go into battle with, let's just choose undead because it's simple, a skeleton, and you have used that item before you triggered that battle or went into that battle, that actually will then just chain battles for you. So the item increases the chance of you having multiple encounters after that. So rather than having to rely on the enemies in the actual world and pushing against the wall and all that kind of stuff, you can actually just use an item like that, go into battle with that type of enemy, and then rather than having to rely on what's in the world, it will just chain battles for you after that particular initial encounter. And like you say, there's been, amongst all the reviews that are out there, a lot of criticism about grinding in this game, which I never really had an issue with. I know like people have been saying, there's a job system, of course you have to grind and level them up. But I never had an issue with that. I quite liked kind of, I'm going to change this job now and level that up to the maximum level and get all the skills.
I don't see it as grinding. It's more just you always have a goal in mind.
The
I kind of like that. Always like you're always progressing.
if you-
in some way, shape, or form, have goals like as you're progressing. I don't think there's like there. You don't really have to grind this game, as you said. Like even in harder difficulties, like there'll be like difficulty spikes for sure, but it's more of trying to look at your like jobs and seeing like what kind of chemistry can I shape my party in to make the best use of offense and defense against this enemy, because like all those bosses like aren't like doing random attacks. They're kind of you know what to expect once you see them once. Like, okay, this is the type of like attack pattern, what buffs and debuffs they're using, and then you kind of have to kind of put all that into perspective. Like, okay, there's a way to counter these. You don't have to like go max up all your jobs and whatever.
Well, I feel like a lot of it is a bit of perspective. Like if I have not played this game, I downloaded it, but I've been busy with other things this week, so I haven't started it yet. But if I get a new job in a game like this, and I'm like, okay, I want to do like 5 battles just random encounters, because I want to see what this job's capable of, how strong it is, what some of the abilities it can learn. Like to me, that's just part of playing the game. But if I go into the mindset, oh, I got a new job and now I gotta level it up, what a grind. It's just kind of like it's the same thing viewed 2 different ways. So it just kind of depends on how your initial feelings are on the base systems at play in the first place.
I think my issue with it is the jobs is the fun part, like leveling those up, experimenting with them,
Right.
switching them about, job and sub job. You can have, so your main can be Vanguard. It's one that is early on in Josh's unlocked. Your sub could be freelancer, because there are benefits to things like that, such as examine, which lets you check out, it basically scan an enemy and see how much HP, their weaknesses, and all that kind of stuff. So that's quite useful. The playing around with all that stuff is great, and I think lots of people are going to really enjoy that side of it. The issue I have with it is the grind doesn't necessarily come on. I mean, there is the grind on the job side of it, but the items and the chaining battles makes that relatively straightforward for people. And there's also a sort of weird, sort of like Street Pass like game or activity you can do in this in Brave Default 2. So there's a lady you can talk to who basically you go up to her and say, I want to set sail and go on an adventure. And she's like, oh, great, I like boats.
I love her.
And what that does is basically over a period of 12 hours, so say you're playing Bravely Default 2 right now, over a period of 12 hours, if you suspend the game whilst the game's suspended over 12 hours, you go around basically and you connect to other random players that are playing Bravely Default 2, and you can kind of, in this weird thing that's automatic, so there's no interaction to it really, but you basically sail around and there's a chance you can get a treasure chest or find a bottle in the water or stuff like that, or visit an island and all that kind of stuff. You get items from that, these orbs that can give you job points or experience and stuff like that. So my issue isn't with that sort of like thing, like you go into bed, all right, I'm going to suspend the game, fall asleep, or go to work or whatever, distraction you've got in your life. Suspend the game, then come back to it. You'll get those sort of items that sort of like buffer and bump up, all that kind of process for you. Progress, that's the word. My issue though is these difficulty spikes, and playing the game through, when you get hit with those kind of walls, these bosses you come to, it's hard to work out what the issue is. So as I mentioned earlier, all the enemies in the dungeon are running away from you, so you think, well, my level must be strong enough. Maybe it's my, it's the makeup of my party. So you change, you try thinking, oh, I'll try this or I'll try that, and then that doesn't work, and you think, oh. So you end up sort of like head spinning a bit. You're like, well, my level must be okay. I could go and grind for a bit and experience and try and level my party up and gain a few more levels. Or maybe it's the job setup I've got for my whole party. Is that the issue? And that's the kind of lack of clarity I think this game runs into quite repeatedly, where you're not quite sure how to overcome a boss. And even the last boss, before I hit the credits, I basically chanced out on that because one of my characters had a sort of passive ability where they can withstand an attack with 1 HP. and I mentioned that job. One of the jobs has an attack that deals damage over time. I'd attacked with that person, and then they got wiped, and the other 3 characters got wiped, and there was this one character left on 1 HP, and that was how my game ended. Everyone's dead. But
sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I don't know.
Yeah,
I was so relieved. I was like, "Oh, I've beaten the game." Ugh. Anyway, sorry,
I do like. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I do really like. I'm very much like a mechanics, nuts and bolts, how the gears work, which seems like this game should be perfect for me. Especially games with jobs are always like excellent for that sort of thing. But just in the interest of like we're a half hour in, I know we've got a ton to talk about. I don't know if maybe you can give me one final 1 sentence or 2 sentence takeaway from your time with Bravely Default 2.
I think it's a game that, I think it's a game that everyone will enjoy. Obviously, read Cullen's review. Mine actually isn't up yet because live stuff happened this week and I was a bit behind. I've written half of it, but another half to go.
We look forward to reading it.
I mean, I think there's a lot to like about it. The story is interesting. The twists and turns. One thing I literally was like jaw dropped like when it happened, and it's a game of perseverance. I think if people push through that first part, I mean, Josh is on hard mode and clearly still enjoying it. So maybe I was just bad.
Okay, that's probably just a me thing of like, man, I really like it.
but yeah, I think the first impression is a relatively positive one, but those early difficulty spikes can be very punishing with what's available to you at that point in the game. But push past those, and I think the rest of the game people really enjoy. And maybe you too can beat the final boss with 1 character on 1 HP, just like me. And you can
the goal we all strive for.
That's so good. I guess before we move on, I just wanted to mention, I don't know if this changes, after where I'm at it early on in the game, but I really appreciate the way they design the towns where there's a panoramic view where you can just get a zoom out of the entire town. And in this panoramic view, you can tell right away, these are the places of interest. This is where the inn is, where the shop with the weapons and armor are. These are where the side quest NPCs are. That's all in this panoramic one-shot view. And then you know where to go right from the get-go on that. I don't know if every town has that panoramic like zoom out all in one shot mode, but I really enjoyed that aspect of it. That's such a smart design decision of like, instead of wandering aimlessly, like, oh, there might be an quest NPC that I'm missing, I have to go look at every place. It's like, no, just go to that panoramic view and you can go check right away. It's like, that's there. Okay, good.
That's nice. I like it. So has anyone put any time into, just because it's the other major release of this week for our coverage, has anyone put time into Persona 5 Strikers, other than obviously Josh, who reviewed it, which the embargo for that was pretty early, but has anyone played it since its release?
Yeah, I've been playing a little bit of it. Another game I'll talk about in a bit, the Steven Universe game, which I went on about 2 weeks ago now. I focused on that, but now I finished that, I've jumped into Strikers, and I'm really enjoying it. Like, it's surprising, but I got really nostalgic jumping back into the world. Like, I started off and I was hearing the same sort of songs, hearing the characters' voices. I was like, man, I really loved what I played at Persona 5. And that was like 70 hours. I just burnt out towards the end. So it's not like it was a 5-hour thing. And then I was like, yeah, I like that game. I genuinely really enjoyed Persona 5. And now it's more suited to me by being like an action game. But everything Josh has said about it.
Did you play only the original game, or did you play Royal?
I played the original game for 70 hours, Royal for 10 hours, and then I was like, nah, I just don't have time. I don't have the concentration to go again. I'm more tempted to go back to Persona 5 original to finish that than I would be to try and catch up with everything I did in the original.
No, I know. I'm pretty sure most everyone listening to this is aware, but Strikers does not incorporate Royal content. So I was just curious about like how recently it was you had played it, like Royal, which was only a year or so ago, or the original, which was a few more years than that.
Wow, yeah, it has been a few years, isn't it? I think it's like 2-3 years ago, maybe more. Wow. Okay. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. There was a point when I started playing it, I was like, this is gonna be another Hyrule Warriors for me. This is gonna be another game that I play, and I realize I don't like the combat of, and I'm just gonna drop it. But I started experimenting a bit more with the characters, so I started playing as Ryuji a bit, and I really like how he plays. And then I started swapping between him and Joker a lot. And I think they have a really good dynamic gameplay wise. Like I was just charging up attacks with Ryuji, and then Joker's got this thing where he's using his guns, and you can like follow up attacks straight after that. So I was just flying around as him. And I think the moment that made me, I'm all about those one moments that make you go, yeah, this game's rad. And the one for me was when I was playing as Joker, and you can press circle to like jump to specific locations. And this one that I jumped on, I then pressed triangle, and then I'm just riding around on the skateboard, just killing shadows left and right. And I was like, yeah, I really like this game now. Like I'm fully on board.
So is it like obviously when I just played Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, when was that? November, December, whenever it was. Is it like that in the sense it's like a battlefield and you go around killing things, or is it a bit more structured than that?
Yeah, I think Josh is probably better to talk to about it, because I'm only one jail in. I think I'm near the end of that jail, but I haven't seen like where it goes beyond. But so far it seems much more, you do have this, the area is sort of open, but it's not like, oh god, this base here is being attacked. You're kind of just going around doing little objectives, and it's all like serviced by the story. So I don't think it's like that at all, which I think is a change. I really appreciate it.
Like CD, like in Hyrule Warriors, there's like large open battlefields, much like the Dynasty Warriors games could definitely like borrows that aspect of it. And this one, since I know you've been playing through the Persona 5 game, it's much more like those games where it's you're navigating like a palace, which are now jails in this game, but instead of like a singular place, like how Kamoshida's palace was like the school, which is like narrow hallways and navigating through that. This one, it's more open in the sense that there you navigate through streets and like trying to solve puzzles around there to progress and whatnot. But it's structured much like a palace. Just like the scope of it is more open, but not as open as an open battlefield. It's just like streets and walkways and whatnot. But you're still sneaking around, much like the base game, where you're trying to ambush these patrolling shadows. And once you ambush them, they like kind of spill out into like a lot of enemies. Instead of it being turn-based, it's that action gameplay like Hyrule Warriors, where you're stringing light and heavy attacks together. But unlike that, it has the flavor of Persona, where you can like freeze the action at any time by summoning a persona, and then you can go choose, okay, I want to cast this spell, I want to cast this buff or debuff. And that's where it really diverges from the usual Dynasty Warriors-esque formula, because it borrows so many elements from Persona 5, like even down to, hey, I ambushed this shadow, they're all dazed, and I can do an all-out attack and whatnot.
I think for me, the most impressive thing about it so far is that, in comparison to something like Age of Calamity, which is still, like, I know a lot of people like that, I know CD, you like it as well, that adapts Breath of the Wild really well, like graphically, but I feel like it still does a lot of the Warriors stuff, whereas I think I could have gone into Strikers not knowing it was a Muso-esque game, and I would be like, yeah, this is just a really well done action game with a lot of enemies. Like, it takes a lot of what Persona does and uses it. It doesn't just toss it aside. Like, stealth is actually quite a big part of it. You've still got all the party formations, you've still got SP and stuff like that, and like SP runs out fast like it does in the normal game. Like, I'm just really impressed. I'm sat here like, this could just be Persona 5 2, and I wouldn't bat an eye. Well, maybe I'd bat an eye.
Remember like one of the original trailers, they like slyly did the logo where it said P52 on it. Okay. So I actually have played like 2 hours of this, which is probably not the smartest decision because I haven't played the original game, but I kind of have this stupid mindset where I'm like, damn, Persona like multi-platform on PC. I want to get the PC version. And I did the same with Persona 4 when it released on PC like last summer. Was that when that was?
Yeah.
Or was it whenever that was? And so I'm still also in the first dungeon or the first jail. And like, man, that game looks really good at a high frame rate. It goes up to 60 FPS on PC, and I think it also is if you play it on PS5.
Yeah,
I'm not certain though.
It's so,
but it's so like flashy and fast, and it is kind of like you have to be thoughtful. Like I played the game on normal mode because that's just normally what I pick, and then I was doing the very first like major section where Joker has to basically stall a bunch of enemies for a long period of time while the rest of the crew what their objectives are. And I like died. And I'm like, oh shit, am I like terrible at games?
Very first tutorial battle where you hit
No, not the tutorial, but it kind of does this like in media res thing where you have the tutorial battle and then it like backs up like an hour and then you play through some of the story and then you get back to the tutorial battle. A lot of games do that. So I was in the second, like the real time through, and that's when I died. So I still died early on. But then like I started thinking like, all right, let me dash a bit more. Let me not just spam combos. Let me actually like pay attention to like where I'm standing, where the enemy's standing, and use those like George mentioned the skateboard that you jumped on. Like let me use this light post and then press triangle to do like this swinging like a roundhouse kick like while circumferencing the pole of the light shaft. And then like I was actually like, all right, I had to like change my approach, and all of a sudden it's a lot easier. And something about that where I actually felt like how I play this game matters. You don't just spam attacks and win. You actually have to like engage your brain a bit. Like, yeah, this is my jam. I don't know. Of course, a lot of the like references are flying over my head, and I might pause just because like I feel like I'm cheating myself by jumping straight into strikers. But I was just kind of turning my brain off and just enjoying like the art style and the aesthetic and the small glimpses of the characters, even though I don't have any repertoire with them. But yeah, it was just kind of a fun diversion for a couple of afternoons. Like, you know what? I'll try this. Let me just play through this for a few hours, a couple nights in a row, and see how I like about it. And it's enjoyable even without the context. So
I think
I had a good time with it.
I don't think you need well, I'm mixed because obviously I didn't finish Persona 5 and I didn't really play much of Royal. I know Royal doesn't matter, so like maybe I'm a softcore fan of Persona 5, but I don't know. I think it just plays well on its own, like all on its own.
Definitely need some context for Persona 5 because like it takes place several months after, and they do call back to some events, and also it's hard to really be connected with the characters if you don't already have that previous connection with them, because a lot of their character arcs are resolved and over in the base game, and there's more like an epilogue to them of like the lessons that they learned. There's new conflicts, new enemies that you face, new villains, and they reflect what they've learned in the base game onto this game essentially.
Well, the one thing that I'm kind of vaguely aware of early on in Striker is you're like gathering information downtown in the city, and Futaba's like standing in a corner and she's a little on edge, and I know that that's like a major part in the first game, but I don't know like the details. So I'm kind of like, I know I'm missing something here. Like I don't know the context here, and I know that I'm having a lesser experience because of it. So I try to whenever I like jump ahead in a series like this, I try to at least have the mindset where I'm like, all right, I'm admitting to myself where I have shortcomings in my like knowledge base here.
I guess for Alex also, like another big thing that separates this from your usual third-party licensed Warriors affair is that there's a lot of narrative cutscenes in this game. Like the narrative progression of this game, it feels like another like chapter in Persona 5, essentially. The way you interact with NPCs, like the little stylized dialogue boxes and portraits, and the little dialogue options that Joker can like respond to when people are talking to him. It's almost exactly like base Persona 5, and they do such a great job of like making it feel like a natural like continuation of that story, so you don't feel like you're totally alien to like all of the changes they made to the combat system. So like these characters and how they interact with each other and with the new characters feels just like Persona 5 almost.
I did see some people like post some videos of the UI in P5S, and it's actually impressive how close they got the feeling of the interface to Persona 5.
Do you still have that sort of cycle between the missions of like here's a couple of days at school, you can hang out with people, and then into another battle? Is that all gone?
This is after the first like story chapter jail that George and Brian are in. This turns into like a road trip across Japan. Reasons. So like the time management is not really an issue in this game. So even if you go into a jail, you can go to this checkpoint and exit out at any time, and you're not like wasting that day. You're just getting like a free health and free SP recover through these checkpoints and dive back in.
I love that about it.
Yeah.
Having everybody in a van together is probably a great way to build social links. I wish they could do that in Persona 5. God damn it.
I will say this though, my only complaint so far, it's kind of worn down a bit now, but it's to do with what you said, Josh. Where there's a lot of cinematics. When I'm doing this first jail, I was constantly being interrupted. I know it's sort of the tutorial stage, but I'd jump twice up a thing and they'd be like, okay, here's this thing. Okay, do this, and I'm like, okay, I get it. Like the gameplay is so fun.
Yeah.
That let me figure it out a bit, but it does let up as you go on. But sometimes I'm just like,
in typical Persona fashion, it definitely interrupts you a lot in those first few hours. Like you're just making sure that you know how to do this. Like it's okay. I have a brain. I can do this. I swear.
Well,
that's it.
I'm gonna beat Persona 5 Royal before I move on to it. But I rode the whole wave of disappointment when it was revealed as P5S. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, Persona 5 Switch," and it was like it was like a completely like.
But it is on Switch.
Oh, this game, yeah, the game is, but it wasn't like Persona 5.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm just being cheeky.
I didn't know Strikers was on Switch.
Oh, yeah, wow. It's on Switch. I'm sure it runs okay, but it probably has a few dodgy frame rate issues like Age of Calamity does. But it's on my list to play. But I sort of made the choice to play through Royal first before moving on.
It's been amazing to see that people who were very iffy on this game for being branded as like a Muso Warriors game like come around, and it's like, no, this is actually more than that. This is definitely defying my expectations, like an action RPG in the Persona 5 style, and it's kind of nice to see like at least some vindication or justification of like, no guys, this is way cooler. I swear, I'm not crazy.
Yeah, well, it's kind of got that conflation of Persona spin-offs being a dubious precedent, and then Muso games, you have to have like an acquired taste for them. And here's something where it's like, we swear that this Persona spin-off Muso game is good, but it actually is.
That's the sort of thing I was wondering, because obviously Persona Q and Persona Q2 sort of.
Yeah,
like,
Adam might argue that those are actually really good.
Yeah, I really like those, but I just sort of wonder what other spin-offs will come up. I mean, obviously they did the dancing games as well, which I haven't played.
Persona 5 Arena.
I'm hoping.
Oh yeah,
I would love that. I would like that. Like, the thing I like about Strikers as well is just to take these characters and be able to do something with them that isn't like turn-based. Like, I like being able to just jump around as Joker and actually like do the attacks myself. So if they did an arena sort of game, I'd be jumping on that so fast.
I'm still sort of like so behind that I don't even know who or what Morgana actually is, apart from a cat. So I'm still looking forward to finding out what that is.
Not a cat.
Well, not a cat. Well, yeah, but yeah. So that's my next step in life to find out the answer to that.
It's kind of weird. Like I devoured Persona 4 Golden. Like I played it like 3 times back to back when it came out on Vita. I remember like Christmas trips where I'd be like with my folks and I'd be like sitting in a corner playing Persona 4 Golden. But then when Persona 5 came out, I don't know if it was just where I was in my life, or I was busy with other games or life stuff, or maybe I was graduating. I don't remember, but I just like skipped it and then like never went back to it. And I like, now it feels like, well, that ship sailed. And I know it really hasn't. That's kind of a weird mindset to have, but I kind of feel like it's a solved science. It's already been there, but I don't know. At some point I should just like, if I find a gap this summer or something, just play through Persona 5 Royal, just because I really enjoyed what I played it for. Well, and I don't really have a good reason for skipping 5. It just happened.
I had a very mixed experience with Persona series games. Persona 3 Fez, I think I got all the way through to the last boss, but I was under-leveled, so I couldn't beat it.
Oh, you couldn't have one person standing with 1 HP left?
With 1 HP. I wish. Persona 4 I'm not sure how far through I am on Vita, but I didn't finish that one off. Persona 5, the original version, I started, but the pacing of it, I don't know, I just wasn't really in the mood for the long chunks between all the sort of dungeon parts of it. And then I think they announced Royal for like Japan release, and I thought, well, that's going to come over eventually. I'll wait for that. So obviously when that came out, which was that early last year, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's all a blur this last year. It's been horrendous. It's like Groundhog Day every day. Yeah, I started that, and I was a bit more sort of like, right, this is it now. I'm going to definitely get through it. And I'm determined this year is the year I'm going to cross Persona 5 Royal off and say, did it? I now know what Morgana actually is, or whatever mystery.
Good luck. For Persona games, for me, especially from 3 onwards, 1 and 2 were different because of where I was in my life. But I got them done throughout, the course of several months. But for 3 onwards, I was just like, these games were getting longer and longer and longer. I basically have to start and beat them within a month.
Is that how long did Royal take you again? It was 100 and
It took
something?
me 110 hours, but keep in mind, Royal is, if you're talking about all my Persona 5 playthroughs overall, that's probably the 4th time I played.
Oh wow!
Because I played through it the Japanese version. I played the English original base version 2 times for the secret boss fight, and then this would be, I think, my 4th time I played Persona 5. And I was like, and all those, it's like I had to start and beat it within this month, or else I'm never gonna beat it.
Well, I'm sort of dangling Strikers as the carrot. Sort of like, you can't play that until you beat Royal. So, yeah, this year will be the year I think that I beat it and move on to Strikers and see what, how I feel about that one. But
I am. Good luck. That's all I'm gonna say. It's a journey, but I think you can do it. I think you can do it.
I'll keep you posted. 1 dungeon a week.
Knowing that we have a butt ton of Pokemon to talk about, I'm going to quick fire through my other 2.
Do it.
Guilty Gear Strive. I missed last week's discussion on it, but holy crap, do I want that game?
Hell yeah, dude.
So fun. Just fix the lobbies, and I'm sure Josh went on about it last week because they are bad. They're bad lobbies, but the game itself is magic, and I can't wait. Just put Sin in it, please, because he'd be awesome. And I don't really like all of the roster so far. I probably like about a quarter, maybe a third.
Get your PS5 or PS4 hooked up through LAN, and we can play.
Yes, yeah, I will. Remind me, that's on the list.
Yeah, so I'm going to take the opportunity to plug the Discord. It only happened once during the beta, but we had some people streaming some gameplay of Strive, and then George jumped in with his Wi-Fi connection and crashed the host.
Hey,
I really want to start making that somewhat of a normal thing in the Discord of just opening it up for people being able to interact with us, have a good time. It was a great time playing GG Strive.
And I'm not a fighting game player at all, but I was watching that game and just enjoying the art and the animations and the arc systems works, just their whole stylings. It's a fun game just to spectate, even as a neophyte like me. It was enjoyable time.
And the second game, which I'm almost sad to speed through, but because I have done one of my longest reviews on it that is now up on the site, Steven Universe Unleash the Light, I'm talking about, I feel like I can say, go read the review. That review's really long, really detailed, but my impressions are it's the best Steven Universe game there's been. There's only been a few, but it is the best one. And I would honestly recommend it to anyone who's wanting a Paper Mario sort of game, because it is that sort of gameplay. I was a bit concerned at first about how movement would go. I think I mentioned this before it came out. I'd be like, oh, it's a mobile port, so it's going to be a bit weird, but it works really well. And it's one of the only games I've played recently where I just could not take my eyes off the screen. I could just not stop playing. Every time I put it down, I was like, I'm going to go eat, and then, yeah, I want to go back and play Steven Universe. So
weren't you kind of lukewarm going into this 2 weeks ago?
I was cautiously optimistic because I didn't love the last game, and I say this in my review, but just because I love Steven Universe, just because of that, it doesn't get a free pass. So I was going into it like, okay, this could be good, this could be bad. I really don't want to write up a negative thing on Steven Universe, but if I have to, I have to. And I just loved it. It's a really competent RPG for how short it is. It's about 12 hours long, I'd say. But you can do a lot with it. All the characters have different moves that interact with each other. They finally fixed the battle system, so it's kind of hard to explain. I had to really concentrate when I was writing it down how to explain the mechanics of it, but rest assured, you don't have to sit and wait for your meter to charge up now, which is what you had to do in the last game, and bored the tears out of me. It's now just
the last game was only mobile, right? And then this game is on the consoles? Or do I have that wrong?
The last game was available on consoles, and then this one used to be only mobile, which is why I skipped it. I'm so glad they brought it to consoles, because this is the best game, and I'm so happy that it turned out like it did.
Was the other game bad? Like the one that was on consoles, is this the best one out? Obviously you said it's the best one out of the two, but is the other one just not great?
The other one is a different type of game in a lot of respects. It focused more on exploration, which was really cool at the time because you'd never had like an explorable beach city before, which is where Steven Universe is set. But I feel like the trade-off there was that the exploring was really fun. It was a bit slow, but it was fun. But the combat was just okay. I'll do a very quick explanation of why it wasn't great. Basically, when you go into combat, you have a star meter, and on that star meter, every time you use a move, it takes away some of that meter. So say you start off with 5 points in it, and then you use a move, and then it's down to 2. And then obviously you can only use moves that are 2. And if you can't use a move, you have to wait for that to refill. And in that time, enemies can attack you as you're waiting. And that doesn't sound too bad, but the meter takes ages to refill. So it's better to use items, but you don't get items very much. And so most of the time you're just sat there. You're literally just sat there watching enemies come and try and like slowly edge their way towards you. And then the attacks just don't do much damage at the start, and it's just a slow process. And even though I wanted to carry on with it, I was like, nah, it's just not worth it.
It's funny listening to this because I'm like, isn't this just ATB? Kind of.
Yeah. It is like ATB, but you can't do anything else. Like, you can't change positions for characters. Like, as soon as you get into that battle, they're all stuck where they are, which means that some of their moves can be completely like bugged. They just won't work like they're supposed to. It's such a difficult thing to describe. It's game feel again, where like a game just doesn't feel good to play, and like that's it. So I would love to recommend Save the Light as well, but I don't really. Whereas Unleash the Light, I'm like, yeah, go for it. If you love Steven Universe, go for it. If you want a good, fun little RPG, go for it. I can't recommend it enough.
I'm glad that you were able to cover this for the site, like something that you're just legitimately passionate about, and just one of those properties like just have it to align with, the objective and goals of the site. That it's very cool.
Yeah, isn't it?
About Steven Universe for the site.
It's so niche. That's why I'm happy to sort of speed through, because I know there's like maybe 2 people in the world listening right now who are like, yes, Steven Universe RPG. For you 2 people, go on, go play.
Look, the only time I've ever like interacted with like Steven in the name of something is like Even Stevens the show back in the day.
Well, sometimes with our site, since like a lot of it, admittedly, like the review, it's easy just to attribute it or RPG sites review or whatever, and like the writers can sometimes be a bit faceless. But like sometimes when a game like this is covered, it's because we got someone like George behind it who's really passionate about it, and that's why we got a review up in the first place. So I'm glad that we were able to highlight it here.
Yeah, me too.
I know you already talked a lot about Bravely Default, Josh, but was there anything else this week that you put time into?
No, I'll talk about the other thing next week, and I can fully talk about it, and then we can get into that. Other than that, all I can say is I downloaded this Outriders demo. I intend to play it. I know it's a bit short, but I'm so curious about it. It's the next it's the new game from People Can Fly, so the Bulletstorm people, and I've heard good things about it. I'm very curious about it. I need to find the time to play it.
So I've been playing it a little bit, so I can kind of hop in and give some impressions.
Hello, James.
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast.
Kind of quiet.
Go ahead and talk about Outriders.
So I haven't played too much. I played up through the tutorial basically and got started with the main game. First off, the visuals are very impressive. I've seen some people say that it has some performance issues. I haven't been having that, but granted, I just upgraded to a 3070. So if I wasn't having good performance, I would be worried.
The neat thing about this demo, before you continue, is that this is available through nearly all platforms except Switch. So there's like PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series, Epic Game Store, Steam, and whatnot. And they're all cross-play with each other, even in this beta. So that's really cool that they're just offering that like from day one, that you don't have to wait for some cross-play update. It's all cross-play from the get-go.
I will say that the demo's build is probably pretty old, because there's a few little issues that I had that I've noticed that are already confirmed that they'll be fixed by the final release. And the reason why I'm sure it's an older build is that for like consoles, since this is crossplay, that means that they would have had to submit the demo over a month ago or something like that, which means that they had to. It's all being held back, I'm sure, by the console development for the demo. So the PC version is definitely months behind whatever build they have now. There was a 30 FPS cap in cutscenes, and what's considered a cutscene or not is kind of weird because there was like this scene where you're in the back of this truck as it's rushing through like this war zone that looks really good, except the frame rate wasn't so hot. But as soon as I got out of the truck in the same exact area, suddenly it jumped up to 100 plus FPS. So it's like, clearly that was being like capped to 30 or something like that. And then there's like some shaky cameras in some of the cutscenes. And long story short, they've already confirmed that that's going to be fixed by launch. It's going to be unlocked frame rate and cutscenes. There's going to be an option to disable motion blur without going into the INI file. This game is being advertised with support for DLSS. I don't think I'll really need it because I'm already getting consistently over 100 frames at 1440p. So it's like, whatever. But that's good to know.
Why get 100 frames when you can get 200 frames?
Exactly. But yeah, the gameplay is fairly basic, but the shooting feels good. The addition of abilities is pretty nice.
This game's Outriders is like an action RPG shooter, and then
I was going to ask, is this an RPG?
Yeah, it's an RPG. It's a third-person shooter, and you have like you can select one of four like RPG classes early into the game. Like you have like this big hulking tank guy that can like summon like an earth spike out of the ground. Then there's this technomancer that can like deploy a turret. It's like a bit more like tactical based and whatnot. And I'm trying to think. There's a pyro class, which kind of speaks for itself. You can like throw fireballs or whatever at opponents. And I think the last one's called Trickster, and that's like all about mobility, I think.
Yeah. But not too much to say because again, I only played a bit. I basically played until I got a heart crash, which apparently I'm not the only one that's been having that issue. So hopefully the bugs are ironed out by the release. I'm not sure if it's going to be on Game Pass or anything. Probably not. But well, actually, is it?
I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. I don't think so, but I don't know.
Is the demo like the early part of the game?
Yeah, it's like the first
to the full game, or
it's like yeah. So this is the opening chapter, like the prologue, and maybe chapter 1. I forgot the scope of the demo, but they did.
You have access to chapter 1 of the story, and then you have access to the first region and like 4 side quests.
Okay, and then they did confirm that your save data from the demo can transfer over to the full game, but it's like a platform to platform thing, so you can't have like a Steam save file transfer over to the Epic Game Store.
Well, the game's out on Steam. Why would you buy it on Epic?
I mean, for people who won't use it, then or like
Yeah.
It's also going to be out on Stadia on release day as well. I don't know if you can do like a PS4 save file into the PS5 version of the game. I don't know about that either.
Yeah. I will say that the loading times were pretty good for what I saw, but as I was saying before the podcast, I got a new SSD, so maybe that has to do with it. Really, not much else to say. It seems promising. As long as the bugs are like sorted out, I'll definitely try it out.
Yeah, I want to try this demo out and see how it runs on my 970. And if that goes well, maybe I'll get a PC. If not, I can just get the PS5 version since it's crossplay. So it's nice, when a dev like really commits to just having crossplay all across the board. You don't have to worry about like, oh man, can I party up with my friends or not? So
one of these days,
hopefully more people adopt that mindset like this game.
Yep.
Have you been playing anything else this week, James?
So it's funny, since I did get that new GPU, I was like, why would I play Control on PS5 when I can play the Game Pass version on PC with ray tracing? So
I forgot it was on Game Pass.
So I basically started over on Game Pass, and I played a little bit beyond where I got on PS5, so about like 2 or 3 hours. And that was basically it, because I ran into crashing issues that apparently is a known issue with the Game Pass version. So
I was actually going to ask, like, how's been your Game Pass experience? Oh,
Is there,
Outriders is crashing, Control is crashing.
has your experience with the Game Pass version with ray tracing, like, has that like transformed like your playtime with it, or like how do you think more highly of the game with the way it implements ray tracing?
I mean, it looks fantastic, obviously, and DLSS, this is like my first chance being able to actually see it in motion. I did play a little bit of Death Stranding, like 30 minutes with DLSS enabled, and I'd say it definitely looks very good. For stuff like hair, if you look closely, you can definitely see some like visual artifacts, but for the most part, it's like a no-brainer to have it enabled if you're going, especially if you're playing something with ray tracing, because it's really not a huge visual impact. And the performance impact, though, is very, very huge. So definitely a game changer in that regard. Because, like, I mean, like 1440p DLSS, I'm over 100 FPS with literally everything maxed. And it's very impressive when it's not crashing. Yeah, I will say, though, that it has given me some some different perspective on the PS5 version. I would say that even though like Digital Foundry went over like the differences in the graphic settings, like for PC and PS5, PS5 version is still very good. I don't think you're really missing out on too much if you play it on PS5. In fact, like it does have DualSense implementation with the triggers and the haptic feedback, so it's still a very good version of the game. And if you don't have a RTX capable graphics card, it's still definitely worth playing.
See, I liked Control. I've actually downloaded the PS5 version. I've jumped in for the first about half an hour, and it definitely runs better than the PS4 Pro version, which doesn't need to be said, but it does change the game a lot. But I never saw the sort of like Game of the Year cries for Control. I think it's good. I think sometimes it could be great, but I think overall, I don't know, there were a lot better games that year to choose.
I think Remedy's always known for like narrative though, and I mean I'm similar to James. I think I'm probably like 2-3 hours in, something like that, and then sort of parked it for everything else I have to do. So maybe like Persona this year, I'll try and tick that one off as well and play it through. But I imagine it's a narrative thing, much like saying like Last of Us, which I know you're big on. I think Last of Us and all the stuff that Naughty Dog does is very sort of impactful from a story perspective, and I wonder whether with Control, I mean the gameplay seems quite cool with what they're trying to do, but I wonder if maybe it's a story thing as well.
Well, actually, I can maybe speak to this because I have not played Control. I've not played any Remedy game. So, like, here's my impression of the game, having not played it or really been interested in it, is that it feels like it's like a hard sell. It's when I think of something like God of War 2018, like, oh, I know exactly what this is. It's mythical. It's this giant adventure. The character is got really compelling. Like, I know kind of like and that's another game I haven't played. But then Control, I'm like, all right, I'm playing as a character. I don't remember her name. It's kind of like a third-person shooter set in an office building, but there's magic powers and like bullet time, I guess. Like it just seems like it's a bit impenetrable. It doesn't have that immediate splash in the marketing. So maybe that's a bit superficial. I mean, actually, honestly, it probably really is superficial because like what I just said has nothing to do with like the quality of the game or how it's made or how compelling it is. Immediately sell it. So the only game that I've really had chance to play this week was continuing with the Project Triangle demo. I've just been busy with work and life stuff, other than my time with Persona 5 Strikers. And I think when Josh and I were talking about this game last week, we actually stated like we should try to play through it a second time because it seems like it could be quite different. And it turns out it is. So I wrote up a little feature that I wasn't really planning to for the demo, but I felt strongly enough about my time with it that I decided I really wanted to like put my words down. So the demo is 2 chapters where you make a major choice in between the two. And it's the same choice that they kind of showed off in the trailer at the Nintendo Direct 2 weeks ago about whether or not you shelter the prince or not. And whenever a game comes out of the gate with the marketing, like we have choices and consequences, it's become so boilerplate now that I find myself a bit like I'm sneering at it. Like, oh, really? This again? Like, every game has this nowadays, if you listen to the marketing. But when I played through Project Triangle Demo twice, I made the other choices in like every case that I could. And in the second half of the demo, you end up with a different context. The battle takes place in a different location with different like battle gimmicks, and you've got different party members, and the enemy unit is like a different boss. It's basically like a true, complete like Y fork in the story. And I think the demo was probably deliberately picked to show that. So now I'm like, all right, they come out of the gate, they say this is going to be a game highly dependent on the choices you make, and the demo is really doing its best to sell that. So I found myself impressed. I really think that if you've played the demo once, you really should consider playing through it twice with the other choice. I do feel that strongly about it. So that's, it only took a couple hours, but it was something that I'm really eager to see this game land next year, because it really does seem quite up my alley.
Yeah, I need to try that other choice because I haven't done that yet. Hopefully, I'll get around to it soon. But that sounds really cool, and I really wonder. Obviously, the demo ends when you can actually see, before you can actually see any of like the ripples it would cause through that. But I wonder what is the scope of that, and I really hope that it's the consequences that you've made, it ripples meaningfully throughout the rest of the game through that. I don't want just like a Y fork that just closes back on like a very similar
right.
thing.
It all gets tied up at the end. Only like
yeah.
So hopefully it like really fans out. It's obviously the demo is limited in what it can show, but in the limited scope of that, I think it does a good job. This also is telling me that I really need to play a Tactics Ogre, because apparently this game is borrowing a ton from that.
Definitely play Let Us Cling Together on PSP some way. You'll love it. You'll love it.
No, I know I will or would, but man, I don't have a PSP.
There's a reason that's like, what did Adam say? Your brother? He said that was his favorite game ever. There's a reason.
I don't know if it's his favorite game, but it's easily in his top 10 or possibly top 5. But yeah, this the only real complaints that I had about the demo, and these are well worn, that I think anyone that's played it has voiced, so these aren't like enlightening, but the voice acting is not good. And I usually have a high tolerance for voice acting, as long as like the story is compelling. Like even if the voice acting is average, I'm fine with it. But it's less than average. It's just not good. And then I think the graphical style is a bit muddy. Like you've got these nice, good sprite work, and the spell animations are awesome, but then this is the same thing Octopath Traveler had, where it like vignettes the corners as if you're like watching like through like a film reel or something, and then like it has this depth of field effect where it blurs like what's happening in the back of the room. And I'm like, I'm in a single room. Does it like this? Why is it blurred to such an extent? I know like blurring effects can look nice when implemented in like.
Is it Unreal?
It's Unreal 4, yeah. Like the depth of field effects can look good, like with games that have like long line of sight and like long draw distance and stuff in the way distance is blurred a bit. Like that can look really nice. But when I'm like an isometric view of a room of characters talking and like the back window is blurred, I'm like, really? Like just because you have this in your tool set doesn't mean you need to be implementing it right here, right now, in the way that you like.
I really appreciated that Bravely Default 2 just lets you turn that off. It's like, hey, you want the depth of field? It's like, nah. It's like, okay. It's like, okay, great.
It's what I hate about Octopath Traveler. Like, I can't remember which character it is. Maybe I can't remember the classes or the character now. But there's one character like in a church, starts off in a church.
Okay, yeah. The snow church girl.
and you leave it, and you can climb all the way up this sort of like hill or mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Or
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I was like, oh, this is going to be a really great screenshot moment. And then like you get up to the top, and then the whole thing's just like shrouded or whatever. And I was like, really?
Octopath has like a way to like lessen the effect but not get rid of it, which is really frustrating because obviously they were like leaning towards like maybe we should get rid of this, and then only went halfway, and it's nowhere near how you wanted it to be.
It's just bizarre. It's such a great looking game, and obviously that experience is carried across to Project Triangle Strategy. I mean, we're going to run a competition. What the final name is that?
I really hope it's
strategy.
just a triangle
And then-
strategy.
And then triangle is like each letter in triangle is a character name or something. But I don't know. But I wish they had a more appealing project name for it. Triangle
wonder-
strategy is just.
I want it to be
So-
triangle strategy.
I haven't got around to trying the demo yet. I've downloaded it. So strategy obviously is a very obvious word to choose, but triangle, is that any relevance to anything? Is there a weapon
Yeah,
triangle?
the
Is there
kingdoms.
Yeah, there's
There's 3 kingdoms and they're shaped like the triangle on the map.
and then like within
I
one
shit you
within
not.
and within one of the kingdoms, there's 3 houses, so it like fractals in that way or whatever.
There's a lot of triangle strategies going on in that demo.
If only it took place on
Now-
a triangle grid. Let's make that work. No, that sounds like it'd be awful.
Fuck.
Now I'm just thinking Fire Emblem Three Houses now.
Mhm.
Ah,
That's the expansion. That's
I-
a rumored expansion of Fire Emblem triangle strategy.
Well, I
But it
saw
sounds like
some
the
people
choice-
making the comparison to Three Houses, but outside of the fact that there's 3 major players, like it seems like the protagonist like centers around one of them in terms of like it's not like you're picking which house to play as or which kingdom to play as.
He's in the middle of the triangle strategy.
Yes.
Or she.
Love triangle.
But yeah, it's a good demo and it's worth playing through twice. Obviously, if you didn't enjoy the first playthrough, I'm not telling you must play it again. But if you enjoyed it, I think you'll enjoy it more if you play it again.
How
I
long
wonder
was
if
it?
there's
Like playthrough?
Oh, this is a lengthy demo. It's like maybe 2-3 hours.
Well, like if you
Wow.
if you make a save point before the branching path and then you just make the other decision there, you can save yourself some time. But yeah, it was for me. It was like 2 hours per playthrough. It's like 4 hours total.
Okay. Still quite generous though, considering it's early in development.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's a year away or so. So it's pretty early on to have a nice vertical slice for it.
I also wonder if this is coming to PC as well, because Octopath eventually made it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine there'll be like a period of Twitch exclusivity, and then you'll be able to turn the depth of field off on a PC 6 months later or something.
Force it off.
Or maybe it'll move. I forgot, did Octopath come to Stadia or Amazon Luna? I think it came to one of those services too.
Yes, it is on Stadia.
There you go.
Oh wow. I didn't know that.
I remember. I don't know why I remember that. I was like, "That's just such a weird thing."
If
I'm
you
glad they're
played
using-
Octopath Traveler on Stadia, nowhere else, I want to hear your comments. Please.
Oh man.
You know the engine, they say HD2D or whatever they call it.
Mhm.
Isn't it just like on Unreal Engine like 4 or something?
Yeah, but the art direction of it, or whatever it's classified as, like, would you like them to use that for any other sort of, I don't know, remake of something?
I feel like people either hate or love the art style. I think it would look great with Final Fantasy VI's aesthetics.
Yeah, I would.
personally,
Yeah, early
that's-
Final Fantasy like remakes with that art style, I'd take it for sure.
I think specifically it would work really well with 6 because of it's weird talking about like aesthetics for specific games, but like for like Final Fantasy V, I wouldn't want it, but for 6, I feel like because of how it has a more like grizzled or dark aesthetic, I think that the way that like Octopath looks and the way that the engine works, I think it would look better for 6, say, than like 5.
I'd agree. 6 definitely has that terrain variety that would, in our heads, transition very well.
I
to
wonder
HD2D.
if it would work in like an action-y type game, like a Star Ocean 1 or 2 or a Tales of Fantasia sort of thing. Maybe. I don't know.
I think, maybe, I don't know. I do think it probably would work best with turn-based.
Yeah, I agree with you.
There is like kind of like a weird experimental thought of like, you remember how early Tales games had that left to right battle system on a horizontal field, like
Yeah, that's what I was
play like
thinking
an
of specifically.
yeah.
Yeah, just because obviously they're using it for new games, but I just wondered, like, I thought there must be an audience for, an older game coming back, but in a an HD.
I
Well,
mean, you know I mean, not the real reason, but the real thing we're trying to get at it is like, it's not even HD 2D. Someone like resurrect that 3D dot game heroes effect. Where, like,
I love that game.
yeah, it's awesome.
Well,
someone needs
other similar
to-
games that are not quite under the same banner because it's not the same marketing team, whatever. But the Aiden Chronicles is pretty much HD2D, and then the Sea of Stars indie game is similar to. Mm-hmm. So I think there's definitely a space for that classically styled 16-bit. I'm using air quotes there because it's not really 16-bit, but it's emulating the style sorts of games. All right, so I think we've gone through all 5 of us to talk about what we've been playing. So here we are 90 minutes in or so, a little less than that. And we'll finally move into what I kind of talked about at the header of this, and that's a whole bunch of stuff, ranging from Final Fantasy to Nintendo to troubled game development. As to the namesake of our site, I think we're going to start with Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. What a mouthful. So obviously, a couple days ago, earlier this week, we had a Sony State of Play hot in the heels of Nintendo Direct. So it feels like, in some respect, back to normalcy. And the State of Play, I feel like a lot of people were kind of disappointed in it. It was a lot of games we had seen before, even though I do think that Kena Bridge of Spirits still looks really good. Even though I've never played it, I thought that Five Nights at Freddy's security breach trailer was like, I kind of dig the style of that game, or at least what it's trying to sell from an outside perspective. But then, of course, the big climax at the end was this announcement of Final Fantasy VII Remake coming to PS5 with graphics.
And the graphics on PlayStation 5. Yes.
And then, of course,
graphics, finally. And DFE.
Yep. And then also, of course, a surprise that I don't think anyone was expecting, a new Yuffie-based DLC episode of some sort that is exclusive to the PlayStation 5 version of the game. I think some people were expecting Xbox announcement or PC Epic Game Store announcement. No, none of that. It is coming out for PlayStation 5 on June 10th. So,
there's a rumor for an Xbox event in March, and the exclusivity for like Final Fantasy VII Remake ends after April. So I don't think it's necessarily impossible that we just get the other next-gen versions announced later, but still before the June 10th date.
Maybe. That's definitely possible. I guess an important note to hear is that PS4 purchases of Final Fantasy VII Remake will get upgraded for free to Intergrade, but the Yuffie part is separate, a separate purchase, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
Yes. Another thing to add to that, because Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to be the PS4 PlayStation Plus game next month, that version does not get the free upgrade.
Right.
You have to own the game in order to get the upgrade.
And obviously, people who bought a physical disc of FF7 Remake but have a digital PS5 won't be able to upgrade because they need to have the disc inserted into the console to play the upgrade already. So you need to have like a PS5 with a disc drive for sure if you're going that route. But other than that, I mean, they come out big with this. A lot of visual enhancements, a lot of very atmospheric lighting. Obviously, they have a performance mode to 60 FPS, which will probably run very nicely and look really nice on for that game. They have a graphics mode that supports up to 4K. And as
the typical
earlier,
a photo mode option. And the Yuffie thing's a bit weird because I saw some people saying like, well, in the original Final Fantasy VII, Yuffie isn't around this early, but of course, that's all kind of out the window at this point. People are saying, well, Red 13 was so close to being playable that we're still having to wait on him, I guess. Yes, I suppose is the answer there. But obviously, the Final Fantasy VII Remake did have a little bit more of an emphasis on the war with Wutai that was present in the original game, but kind of a backseat to everything else. So obviously, that's where Yuffie hails from. So the fact that she's going to have a story presence so early, is it going to go deeper into that sort of thing, like the stuff that was sort of touched on to like Chapter 4 of Final Fantasy VII Remake? So
this is very promising on that because they're setting up like a narrative relevance for Yuffie early on. Because obviously in the original FF7 game, she was an optional character, and so she had very limited interaction with the story and the party. She'll have like maybe a one-liner here and there, but she had very little relevance because she was optional and they couldn't account for that. It's the unfortunate part about being an optional character. Like you think about Yakuza Like a Dragon, and the optional character there, she's not present in any of the cutscenes once she joins the party.
I do wonder how big this new content is going to be, because we see like one boss in the footage. And
Well, yeah, unfortunately, the
Is that it?
precedent is for Final Fantasy 15, it had these character-specific episodes too, and I don't think any of them were that well received, and they were usually like a few hours.
Yeah, their legacy was mostly for their like soundtracks. Like I remember Keiichi Okabe, who's most famous for his like doing NieR. He did like the OST for the Gladio episode, I believe, and that was really good.
I don't know how to pronounce his name, if it's Arden, but I know that the last DLC they did had actually a pretty good reception. Not sure if that was because they knew they weren't going to have any of the Ever DLC and they wanted to go out for bang or what, but I do know that people liked that DLC for 15.
Fun little fact, the episode Arden review is the first thing I ever did for RPG Site.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I can agree with you. That was probably one of the better ones.
I still didn't like it. It was the least bad, maybe. I didn't like running over the city. Is it in Altissa? I don't remember. But
yeah, I think it's
yeah, I hated that part.
And like I didn't like running around the city and like you do like these weird like capture point type things, if I remember right, and then you end up like going to these shopkeepers and like buying new hats or something. Like it's just
yes.
I didn't like
so
that.
much fun.
But what they've shown here looks
canon.
Yes, it's all canon. What they've shown here is I think a little bit better, but obviously it's a trailer, it's marketing, so how reflective of the actual content we'll have to see. One thing that is kind of interesting is that in Final Fantasy VII Remake, obviously you play as Cloud whenever you're not in battle, but when you're in battle, you can switch to any of the party members. Though the way they're describing this here is that it seems like you play as Yuffie, and then the new character that she's partnered with, who is Sonon. It seems like it's not confirmed, and there's a little bit of wiggle room in the way it's stated, but it seems like that he is basically a second part to like combo attacks and things like that, where you'll have to like set up different attacks that utilize his positioning and skill set and things like that. At least
the way they visualize this in the trailer. Yeah, the way they visualize this in the trailer is this new character Sonon has his main weapon is like a bow staff, and like part of Yuffie's moveset for one of her skills is like hopping on that bow staff and he'll launch Yuffie like somewhere so she can like attack from the air or something and whatnot. It looks very versatile, very fast, very agile, in Yuffie like fashion. But I did like, and a lot of people are like, I don't know, man. But there are a lot of nods to Dirge of Cerberus with this Yuffie reveal. Like her in her Moogle costume is a callback to Dirge of Cerberus with her presence there. And in one of the very fast snapshots of this trailer was there's this guy who has like crazy long spiky white hair, and that's Weiss.
I have
from
played Dirge of Cerberus, but I had like scrapped that guy from my memory. I'm like, who the hell is this? Oh, apparently I played this game where this guy was the antagonist, and I don't remember. Oh god.
Yeah, he's like the leader of Deep Underground, and that's like a very super elite underground society band that was like fleshed out.
It's like the crappiest version of like sequel shit, where it's like this is the top tier soldier units that were never relevant until this sequel. Now it's like, why weren't these guys like relevant in the original game if they were like so powerful and top tier and secretive? But whatever. But yeah, they're present in the trailer.
Here,
say that again.
Do you think we'll see Vincent at all at this Yuffie DLC thing, or allude to him whatsoever?
Maybe like as like the sequel tease at the end, like you'll see like a red cape or like a coffin opening or something. I don't know.
Like, yeah, sure, why not?
There'll be a flashback with a. Oh wait, is that a Final Fantasy VII spoiler? I won't say that. This game is so weird to talk about. Okay, I guess that kind of segues. We'll probably talk about these projects in parallel, but obviously that wasn't the only Final Fantasy VII announced project from this State of Play. I almost said Direct.
This was weird. Yeah, this was weird because they weren't in the State of Play presentation. They came out and just like...
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, they were followed up. So the one I want to talk about is Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, which what this is a mobile game. Is Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis? Let's see. Yes. All right.
Yeah.
And what this is that this is a mobile game coming out next year, so it's slated for 2022. That is a single-player, chapter-structured game that covers the whole Final Fantasy VII timeline, including compilation. So the fact that we're already seeing teases of like Dirge of Cerberus, and then there's other stuff that this game could cover about like before Crisis, which is like the prequel that I don't think any of us in the US played, or at least not easily. So this is something where it's like, if this game is going to cover the events of the original game, the remake, the compilations, and it's going to be like, dropped in chapters. To me, it's interesting because, all right, is it going to go through the events of the whole original game, or only up through what, say, Remake Part 2 gets to cover, and then skip ahead into compilation titles? Or is it going to cover like Final Fantasy VII OG and then Final Fantasy VII Remake? And then at that point, do you start assuming that you have to have the knowledge base of what happened in the OG and what happens in Remake? It's a weird thing, like when you're designing whatever Remake Part 2 is, what expectation do you have of the player for what they are aware of, which is already tricky in the first part, but now I feel like it's muddied even more.
Yeah, this is.
I'm just gonna say this as a possible nightmare scenario that I'm sure as soon as I mention it, George is gonna go insane.
Yes.
What if the events in the mobile game in Ever Crisis end up becoming critical knowledge for the console Final Fantasy VII Remake?
10,000%.
Like akin to Kingdom Hearts.
This is definitely going to happen. There's no reason they wouldn't do this.
Nomura.
Yeah. Okay. So let's kind of step back. Ever Crisis, like you mentioned, it's up for mobile, but the screenshots and the footage that they released of it, first off, the visuals are very similar to Pocket Edition. Yeah, they're charming. They're much more.
I wouldn't even necessarily say Pocket Edition. I feel like that's an insult.
It is a bit.
Yeah,
you're right. It is a bit of an insult. Pocket Edition wasn't, didn't have the greatest visuals. This is much more. What would people think is a more quote unquote faithful adaptation of the original visuals to like a more modernized style? So they're still kind of like chibi and kind of like polygonal, but more refined. It looks pretty nice,
in my opinion. Yeah, it looks dope. I actually really like it. I'll say from the little we've seen of what the battle system is, it definitely looks a bit simplified, but there's still like, I'm just curious if this is going to be a freemium game, if you have to pay for it. Because if this is a like purchase, you just buy it sort of deal, I'd be down to play it. It seems like it'll be neat.
Yeah, it feels like they haven't announced anything yet, but it sounds like they're gonna go with the Pocket Edition model of like you pay for like additional episodes or content in it. It's not like a gotcha thing or anything like that. That's what I think with the way they worded it. And like you said, the battle system looks similar-ish to what they've done in Remake, but in a much more condensed form. So it does have like the ATB gauge, and you still like take. I'm not sure if it's like turn-based or actual, or it's still action, real-time action and whatnot. It's hard to tell at the moment.
I think I'm going to bet money that if they're going with a more faithful art style, they're probably going to go with a more faithful battle system.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this is that the character portraits look like they're from the Etrian Odyssey character designer. I'm not sure if they've confirmed that, but it looks very similar.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
it looks very similar to that.
So here's something I want to bring up, and I want you to chew on this for a bit. So at the end of the Ever Crisis trailer, the logos that it shows are Final Fantasy VII, the original, before Crisis, which is like the mobile game prequel, Crisis Core, the PSP prequel, Dirge of Cerberus, which obviously we've already seen in the trailer for the PS5 version of Remake, and then Advent Children. So it's going to go through the events of that, which is like, I think,
Kadaj lives.
Yeah. But one thing interesting is that it doesn't say specifically, like it doesn't show the logo of Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I'm wondering, like, is it going to go through how the story was printed in the original game or the remake or both? I guess maybe this is the same question I was asking earlier, but man, what a soup to have to try to.
I guess this is, they basically spoiled the twist with the trailer for the PS5 version. So I think it's safe to say that Remake isn't just a remake. So I think the existence of Ever Crisis is to give people the Final Fantasy VII like anthology knowledge that they need for Remake.
Very good.
So I think it's going to follow the original plot.
Yeah,
that's my assumption.
This is their solution of like, we don't want to like re-release Crisis Core and Dirge of Cerberus as they were, so we're gonna give you this, and hopefully it works out. I don't know. This is such a like a weird and somewhat exciting thing to like just see how they recontextualize and how what the scope of this thing is. And this a neat thing about this is developed by Applebot. And for people who don't know Applebot, they've just recently released NieR Reincarnation in Japan for Square Enix, and same developers, so they've had a very, very close ties with Square Enix for some time. And before that, they worked on another game called Blade X Lord, which is not really a great game. It looks really nice, but
it's just fascinating seeing Square Enix go all in still on like AAA mobile development. It's like, I know people obviously aren't huge fans of mobile games, but for stuff like our Ever Crisis, I think it has the potential to be like a really good choice for it. Now, hopefully, it also gets the Pocket Edition like deal where it gets ported to Switch, because I feel like that would actually be really cool.
Pocket Edition and episode Arden died, so Yuffie DLC and Ever Crisis could live or something. But like one thing you said earlier was like, this is giving you the anthology knowledge that you need. Like, I am not interested in finding a PS2 or emulating Dirge Service again. I'm not. But if you told me like, okay, I could refresh my knowledge of what the heck happens in that game because I like emptied it from my brain through this game, like, sure, why not? I'll do that. That is not an excuse.
So here's a question, and this is definitely way out there, but if it's faithful remakes of the original game, maybe it'll still be a third-person shooter for the Dirge of Cerberus stuff.
I would laugh my ass off if that happened. I really wonder, like, the scope of like how "quote unquote" faithful this is, because this is a way for them to like integrate like things that happened in before Crisis, Crisis Core, and Dirge of Cerberus into like the main
Advent Children
narrative to make it, and Advent Children to make it like stick together a bit more, elegantly. It's really,
It's kind of crazy that
it's going to be fascinating.
We're more like tied down on this Ever Crisis thing than we are on the PS5 version. Maybe it's because it's just like a Yuffie chapter, which I think we're all trying to rein in our expectations a bit. It'll probably be a handful of hours, maybe more than that if we're lucky. If it ends up being more substantial than we're thinking, then of course that's all just gravy at that point. But Ever Crisis, and that's an undertaking right there.
We're gonna live for FF7 for the rest of our lives at this point.
Apparently.
Yep.
So there was one other project that was announced tied to Final Fantasy VII, and that is Final Fantasy VII: The First Soldier, which is another mobile-based project, a battle royale game coming this year. So, what do we think about this thing?
That's what I think. That's what I think. Oh man, this is a really, really funny announcement, because the way they framed that trailer is like Final Fantasy VII Battle Royale. Like the pause.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, sure.
I just don't know what to think of when I see like a third-person shooter perspective of what I assume is like a nameless soldier, like up in the rafters of the church with the flower bed. I forget which sector that is. I'm like, wait, what? Like, why are we here? Like, why is there a shootout happening in this place?
Because that's where we're dropping, man.
Yeah, why is any of this happening?
We could drop at Sector 3 where everyone's gonna be at, or this Chocobo Ranch.
Very, very weird week for Battle Royale announcements.
Yes.
Considering, like, between this and that, like, weird dodgeball Battle Royale game that actually does look kind of neat, but not RPG. So yeah,
the interface for this is obviously it's ridging on running on PUBG Mobile. Like, you have the compass up ahead, and the UI is very similar to PUBG Mobile. Obviously, if you're gonna like style a mobile battle royale, it's gonna be PUBG Mobile, because that's very, very successful out there in the East, all throughout Asia and whatnot.
I like how the tagline at the end of this trailer is, "Can you become history's first soldier?" Like capital soldier from the series. Is that the whole conceit of this game? Is that these are all the people who failed to become soldiers or something?
Pretty much. That's the story reason, it sounds like.
Oh yeah,
right?
I guess
like,
it said 30 years before the events of Final Fantasy VII. So this is like the start of the soldier project, and we're all the.
I do love.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah. There was all that speculation. It was like, oh, maybe it means Sephiroth. Maybe it means Zack.
Oh yeah,
it's like, no, it means
back when the trademarks were filed. No, it means you. We're all the first soldier.
That's right. You have your guns, you have your sword, you have your magic spells here. That's probably going to be like the weird how it distinguishes itself in the battle royale space. But the really exciting part is some months back, PUBG Mobile had a collaboration with GACT. I shit you not, they had a collaboration with GACT. So there's a possibility of us coming full circle, and this FF7 First Soldier thing collaborates with GACT.
There
And
we
then you
go.
have Genesis.
Genesis is the
in
final
this
boss of the first soldier.
Yes.
And then,
Yes!
and then he wins and becomes the first soldier, and you lose. I don't know.
All right, I'm on board. FF7 is good again.
One final bit of Final Fantasy VII news. This came out about Famitsu interview that was published pretty much right alongside the State of Play or right after. And that is that Tetsuya Nomura, obviously like the director of Final Fantasy VII Remake, will not be directly helming whatever the next installment is. He is going to step back into a creative director role for the whole new anthology, or whatever you call it, the compilation part 2. And then instead, Naoki Hamaguchi will be the director of Remake Part 2. So I don't think this is a major change. Obviously, it's kind of like a bright headline, but Hamaguchi was already like co-director of Remake. The interesting part here, George, is that Nomura says, George, that he has a lot of projects underway. So that's why he has to lighten his load a bit. So
he specifically mentioned he has an unprecedented amount of titles he's working on. Like, this is the most he's ever worked on right now.
I think I asked this in the staff chat after this news broke. Like, besides Kingdom Hearts, obviously, yeah, Kingdom Hearts. What is he working?
He's working on
has it been said? Like,
versus Yuzora something Kingdom Hearts spin-off.
So, like, yeah, he's creative director of the whole F7 thing. So you assume he's also has a hand in First Soldier. He has a hand in Ever Crisis as an overhead, and however many Kingdom Hearts projects there are, and who knows what else, they have for him.
Like, I've been saying it since FF15. Like, he takes on way too much, and then you saw. I don't know whether it's directly Nomura's relationship with that, but that game was damaged when it was back as Versus 13. But I don't know. If he's putting more into Kingdom Hearts, if he's focusing more on that, great. I don't think Final Fantasy needs him per se, and I think Kingdom Hearts. I think it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, because when you think about it, like, his involvement with Remake was a lot about like setting the foundation. If you have all like the pillars in place now of like where they want to take it to go, like, does it make sense for him to always like be at the helm? And he has so many other things going on. And I think, like, part of Remake's success wasn't just Nomura. This is a collaborative effort between him, between Hamaguchi, between all the art designers, between all the battle system people. Like, every single part of Remake, it was all in the efforts of this creative team.
Any other final thoughts on Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade or Ever Crisis or The First Soldier?
We're all playing that battle royale game, right? You're all with me, right?
Where we drop here, right?
Exactly.
It looks like it. I don't know. It presents itself pretty well. I could see myself having like a few hours of just dumb fun with it. I don't know. Watch it be like story critical though. You've got to see the ending, or else Remake Part 2 doesn't make sense.
I guess one final thought that like I was thinking about when looking at Ever Crisis was, I wonder if any staff members of the Opera Omnia team had a hand in it, because the character models look a lot like in Opera Omnia, and that's a good thing. Like, Opera Omnia looks really nice.
It just feels weird looking at all this new Final Fantasy VII Remake stuff drop, and I just get the distinct impression that, for example, like, Final Fantasy 15 had the whole cross media, a bunch of different stuff that like hit all at once. And it feels like with 7 Remake, they were cautious to see how the first part did before going all in. And now that it was a success, they're like, shit, time to get going.
So now here's everything at once.
I'm not sure if you guys are getting the same impression, but that's like what sticks out to me.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I can feel that.
Yeah, they're kind of more ramping up what their ambitions are rather than setting it sky high out the gate and then failing to reach it.
It's smart, I'd rather have it like this, so rather than the forceful.
You don't want to watch that. You don't want to have to watch a movie in order for the first half of the their flagship game to make any sense.
I still never watched that movie, man. I was like, I can't do it.
I
can't
watch
do
it, but I even forget like what
I
key
feel
details
like
you pull from it.
didn't they finally add like sections of that movie into the game where it was actually like story critical?
I think
Yeah.
so. That sounds familiar.
The best part of
It's-
Advent Children was it being parodied in a Super Smash Bros. Trailer. Mario's dead.
that was actually amazing. It's like out of all the FF7 references you can make for a trailer, you chose Advent Children. That's a power move.
So the day after the state of play, I believe it was the day after, we just kept steamrolling right through RPG announcements and changing gears quite a bit with a new Pokemon Presents
Hooray.
Direct of sort. Pokemon Presents is not the same as Pokemon Direct, I guess, because one is like helmed by Nintendo and the other by Pokemon Company, or is it Creatures, or is it Game Freak? I don't know how any of that works. But we got new detail on a bunch of upcoming Pokemon games. So I don't know what order to go then. I guess we did get the long rumored, long speculated remaster remake announcements for Diamond and Pearl called Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Pokemon Shining Pearl,
Love
coming
the
in
name.
late 2021. And what do we think about these? I think the most distinct and easy to call out aspect of these is how they visually look. The art style is very chibi, very different.
I
don't
will
hate
say I don't hate it either. I will say one thing about the art style is that somebody did like make a mock-up of having the models have like a small like outline to them, and I think that would actually look a lot better. I hope they actually see that and take that into account, because I think that would be a really good small change. It would make the game just be a bit more readable, I feel like.
I mean,
they remind me of they like the thing I think about when I look at like the chibi character models in this game is like I personally find with them, but I think of like squished World of Final Fantasy models.
It just reminds me of the Story of Seasons Friends of Mineral Town remake.
Okay, yeah.
I think for me, it's like it's one of those things where I don't love the new designs. I think they're fine, but it's not the sort of thing I'd be like angry about. I've seen people like, oh, Pokemon Company, like screw you, like you're messing up the game I've wanted remade for years. I'm like, they're still remaking it. Calm down, like just it's not that big a deal.
I think what's weird though, it's got like one of the most popular champions in Cynthia, and you're gonna have like chibi Cynthia, and I think people, especially after Let's Go, that's my sort of. I don't care really either way. I'm going to play it, but I sort of felt like maybe the Let's Go set a precedent for how they were now approaching kind of classic games.
Yeah.
And that I know, obviously, if it was in a Let's Go art style, people would immediately think, "Oh my god, am I going to have to like throw my Joy-Con at the TV to catch a Pokemon?" But I just think that to me was the sort of reaction I had, was like, I thought they had the Let's Go sort of engine now, or whatever. I don't understand. I'm not a developer. I'm completely ignorant to all that. But
I mean that this is the weird thing about the presentation, was like they straight up said like this is an outsourced project. This is developed by Ilka Inc. And obviously Junichi Masuda is still directing it, but he's also directing it with Yuichi Ueda from Ilka. So it was kind of I don't know what to make of it. Like just announcing upfront to everyone, it's like, hey, we're not developing this. This is outsourced to Ilka.
It was sort of that like holding a secret card in your hands of like, oh yeah, we're not working on this, but here's what we're working on, obviously, which we'll move on to. But for me as well, like it just seems a bit weird that then they haven't taken ownership of the project in the same way that everyone who's been holding out for a Diamond Pearl remake now gets that. But
it was I know it was well-meaning what they did with announcing that, but there's also some weird like implication of it behind it. It's like, hey, don't blame us for this. If you're having any complaints, it's Ilka, guys. It's like,
and I wonder if it's actually secretly a Platinum remake rather than a Diamond Pearl remake, in the sense
there is.
I'm not sure about that, considering like Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire was specifically like Ruby and Sapphire content, and Masuda is working as a co-director on this too. So it's like, I mean, I hope it happens, but after Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, I'm not holding my breath.
I saw some people like post some screenshots to try to find evidence that it is actually Platinum Remake. Like, oh, this NPC wasn't there in the original games, and I haven't played like those games recently enough to know that. So I kind of have to take other people's word. Like, if they say a character, oh, in the screenshot that person's only there, therefore must be Platinum.
This
like,
NPC is holding up the 2-sided, and Platinum they said 2, and the originals they only had 1.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like, I have to take your word for it.
One
it's
thing
weird
I didn't
because like I think. Go ahead, CD.
Oh, sorry, no, you good.
I was going to say that like I think so this is probably the last generation of Pokemon that I really got into. And I just feel like Platinum as the third entry was a bit beyond what Yellow or Sapphire, or especially Sapphire, or not Sapphire, Crystal. Sorry, Crystal. I kept thinking of Suicune, but they had kind of like this weird tangent thing with Yellow version or things like that with the third version, but then with like Emerald and Platinum, they really went ham on those. So I feel like a lot of people would be disappointed if this doesn't have the things that Platinum added to the game.
I mean, I was just going to say, like, one thing I didn't really like about what we've seen so far of it was the text boxes, which is a really weird like thing to complain about. But they just, I don't know,
specific.
They just didn't look. I guess they look classic to the Nintendo DS game, but I don't know. I kind of feel like it seemed a bit retro to me, in a sort of like trying to modernize something, but also have it
be nostalgic.
How it was back in the day.
You know, I mean, at least the pros of it having a more simplistic art style and design is that at least the footage they've shown, it looks stable and it looks like, okay, this looks somewhat playable, like, and I don't have to like suffer any like frame dips and frame drops in this. This wouldn't make sense for it to have that if they're going with this more simplistic style, because that's the thing that stuck out to me after the fact of what they showed next. And it's like, you know what, I'm okay with this because at least it looks like it's going to run stable.
Yeah, it's clean and it's. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I just felt like the art styles moved more towards a sort of anime, kind of bringing those two things, bridging the gap towards those. Obviously, Sword and Shield had a mixed reception, tree textures, but the character models in that game were quite anime aesthetic, and then obviously the world was sort of like watercolor, I don't know, which people weren't completely sold on, which I understand. But with the retro games, obviously, Let's Go, that started to kind of move towards more of that sort of anime styling. And this obviously just seems, it's like they've got 3 art styles on the go now. And there's a bit in the trailer where you see like, I can't remember the lake's name, but there's like, you can see the water animation, and that's very realistic. And then everything else is obviously quite in line with the classic Pokemon games.
It's
a mixed sort of bag of everything.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that their aim for this like look of the game was just what would like a 3D render of the classic style of like Pokemon games are, like, the overhead kind of big head overworld type of style, but like 3D renditions of that and what they would look like it's today.
Almost how your brain built out what you saw on the Nintendo DS. Like, you have what you saw, and then how you sort of
how you remember
in
it,
your minds of what it would be, which obviously will satisfy a lot of people. But I don't really have a particular nostalgia for Diamond and Pearl. I don't think I beat them. I really got back into Pokemon when Black and White came out, so slightly after.
That's a common like sentiment I've heard throughout the week of people. It's like, Diamond and Pearl didn't really hit with me, but I really like Black and White. But then they went back on the Diamond and Pearl philosophies and 2 Diamond and Pearl philosophies, and I dipped back out again. Kind of a weird thing.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I don't know whether to play Diamond and Pearl through now and then play the remake through later in the year, because obviously it'll probably come out in November. They said late 2021 or winter 2021 in the Japanese stream, I think, but it's clearly going to be November. I don't know whether to play it through to then have a comparison point, because at the moment I've got like probably maybe 10 hours worth of playing that game in the back of my mind from like whenever it came out.
I will say this, that if these remakes don't get the platinum content, I think I wouldn't be as kind of upset compared to like Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire not getting the Emerald content, because I feel like the main thing with Diamond and Pearl was never like the issues were never a lack of content or post game or anything like that, because like Diamond and Pearl actually had a pretty decent post game. You had that extra island off in the top right corner. You had a bunch of legendaries. You had Cresselia, Heatran, Regigigas, Giratina. You had, I feel like there's something else I'm forgetting too. Well, you had the Light Trio. It was really good, like post game. Like the main problems with base game Diamond and Pearl were specifically these slow battles, which can be fixed in a remake anyways, and the lack of Pokemon variety. And I'm pretty sure every remake since after even Fire Red and Leaf Green had a bit better. Actually, Fire Red and Leaf Green didn't really impact it, but like every remake since like Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which I guess is just two, have had better. Had a better slate of Pokemon for you to use from the get-go. Obviously, the major thing is that we want there to be more than one fire type for people to use. Besides, if you didn't choose Chimchar, you're basically stuck using like Rapidash, I think it was in the original Diamond and Pearl. But yeah, so I think I'll like this anyways. I do wish it was clearly this is a lower budget project than like Sword and Shield was even. I do wish there was a bit more to the remakes, but I'm still excited. Like Gen 4 is my favorite generation, and I do want to replay it. I just, I do hope they have the platinum content. I'm not holding my breath. It would be nice, but even if it doesn't, interested to see what other changes they make.
It's also that weird sort of backstep as well, because obviously if it is a sort of like retro remake in style, do they still have all the hidden machines in there? Because that was something obviously that got chopped as the series has progressed. So you have to have like that Bidoof with like all of those like strength and all that kind of stuff that you get from the hidden machines just to kind of move a boulder.
I'm not just being faithful. Like what is a remake if you don't have to use Bidoof?
I mean, is it really Pokemon Diamond and Pearl about having a Bidoof as an HM slave? Well, I wouldn't worry about HM still being there. Like, even if it's a faithful remake, they haven't had HM since, like, Generation 7 with Sun and Moon, where they literally axed it anyways. Like, every game since hasn't had them. So it would be really, really weird if they made the back step now. So, and hell, Let's Go were technically, like, remakes of Yellow, and they didn't have HMs, so
yeah, it's just like
it's just
weird. They've got sort of like three lines of games now. Like one, this sort of march to the future of what we're about to talk about, the sort of like retro remake, and then Let's Go seems to be its own thing now. Because we're surely going to get like a Let's Go based on the Johto region at some point, whenever that is.
Well, anyway, if they can keep, enlisting these other developers to deal like these smaller projects while they put these main teams and give them more than a year and a half to work on these things. It's kind of like the Call of Duty 3 Studios approach or something, where if it is set in stone that they must have a release every year, and they can kind of even the load a bit by having other teams work on these like remakes or Let's Go's. Maybe that'll work out better in the long run.
Honestly, I'm here for it, because if they're not going to increase like Game Freak's development team size, which they should, it's actually kind of embarrassing how few people they have when Pokemon's the biggest franchise in the world. This is a decent way of handling it. If Pokemon's always going to be a yearly franchise, people have been begging the Pokemon company to let other companies take a shot at mainline games. And having a different company do most of the work for a remake while like Game Freak has more time to work on the next evolution of Pokemon, I'm here for that. I think that's a great idea.
So what you're saying is someone's making the Pokemon Battle Royale then?
Yeah, of course.
Where are we dropping?
I mean, a Pokemon Battle Royale where you evolve mid-match would actually be kind of dope.
That'd be sick. I'd be down for that.
Well, we're getting a MOBA this year, so it's all
true.
Thanks, Tencent.
Only a matter of time.
Let's actually open the gate on what we've been being coy about. So the other thing that they announced was Pokemon Legends Arceus. Arceus? I don't know how to pronounce that. CD
Arceus.
Arceus. So this okay, so this was a game that this is what they ended their presentation with. It is an open world, seemingly turn-based RPG based on like feudal era Sinnoh. Like
It's not feudal. There was actually just like a Noggin video where he was like trying to pinpoint like what the inspiration would have been, and it's actually like just post-industrial.
Oh, okay.
Which is weird.
But it's like early Sinnoh because the whole goal of the game is that the player is trying to complete Sinnoh's first Pokedex. So, and people are going to hate us, and people have already been cynical about this, but it's a sort of game where I feel like you're doing it a disservice if you're not invoking the comparisons to Breath of the Wild. I know people are always going to be like, "Oh, Breath of the Wild didn't invent open world, or it didn't invent outside or trees or whatever." But the fact that it's like, well, as far as I know, it's in it. That's what they tell me. But the fact that it's a genre divergence for something that's been kind of in a rut for a while in terms of what the mainline series consists of and are, they try to change it up a little bit with like Sun and Moon, but now here is like where they're trying to really take a big swing at it and change up what a Pokemon game can be. So this trailer, there's a lot.
Well, I'll let you finish kind of like describing the trailer.
Well, I was just going to say that there are tons of ways you can attack this trailer, how it looked like visually, like objectively, the quality of how it looked, how it ran, what we saw, the art style, the gameplay style. And a lot of it is like, it seems like there's a lot of potential, and maybe it's just our minds getting ahead of our brains a bit in terms of like what's possible. But when I look at this trailer again and I rewatch it, I don't see a whole lot to get excited about right now. But this game is slated for 2022. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me say this. I feel like if you've played the DLC for Sword and Shield, particularly the second one, well, first off, obviously my history with Sword and Shield is kind of spotty. I wasn't a huge fan of the base game, though I was turned around after the excellent expansion pass. Award-winning impressions, or nominated.
Our award-nominated Pokemon writer.
I'll say that some of the things that they did specifically in the Crown Tundra DLC for Sword and Shield gives me an idea of what they might be able to do in Legends, which makes me really excited. Specifically, the way that the bird trio, the Galarian Kanto bird trio, and the way that you have to do specific puzzle solving to even catch them or like engage them in that DLC, that gives me a lot of hope for the things that they can do with how you capture Pokemon in Legends. I feel like it's very interesting. What I see in the trailer, obviously, there's sloppy visuals, there's performance issues. What I see is promise. And I wouldn't normally give them the benefit of the doubt there, but after seeing specifically how they managed to kind of have a pseudo completely open world in Crown Tundra, I'm feeling a lot more hopeful. The fact that they've been working on this and they haven't even been worried about the Diamond and Pearl stuff, that makes me feel a lot better about this. I think this is the next step that Pokemon needs.
Yes.
I wouldn't be hopeful for it if I didn't already see them make those baby steps in the Crown Tundra. Since I've seen them make those steps and play around with it, and obviously, in my opinion, already start to nail it there, I am completely ready to see what they do with this. If nothing else, it's completely different from anything that's come before, and I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt for that alone, just because I want to see experimentation. I'm sure a bunch of Pokemon players have wanted to see experimentation. This is it. I'm go time. I'm ready to see what it ends up being.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting about this. We all want to chat about this. I just want to talk the starters. So the starters are like a cross mismatch of stuff from other regions. So you've got Rowlet, which is Generation 7. And then you've got Oshawott, which is 4. No,
Five.
Piplup's 4. 5.
Yeah.
And then you've got Cyndaquil, Generation 2. I just thought it was interesting because like Rowlet turns into like an archer Robin Hood type thing in Decidueye. And then Oshawott is like a samurai. So those kind of fit the setting. And then you've got Cyndaquil, who turns into
Cyndaquil's here too.
it's like a fire gopher thing. So, but I don't know. It's kind of cool that they can like, all right, we don't have to like reinvent the wheel. We've got some cool starters, and at least 2/3 of them, the majority of them fit the setting. So here we go.
As silly as it is, okay. So, honestly, the main reason I'm so interested in this is that I was a huge fan of Pokemon Coliseum and Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness on GameCube, which was the last time that they really experimented with the main formula in a sort of spin-off game. So I'm just like the fact that they're even going as far as, hey, we're going to have totally different starters. So not Gen 4 starters, it's a medley of previous generation stuff. That is dope. I like that idea.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna keep an open mind on this. All I said is like my one hope is I hope to have a new, more powerful Switch by the time this comes out. That's all I want this game. I want this to be a success because I want them to really shake up the formula, but I want them to be firing on all cylinders too. And it looks like, obviously this early game footage, this game isn't out by 2022. Game optimization isn't, usually done until the end of dev cycles and whatnot. But I want this to be running as well as I could off like from the get-go. And I think this would be like a good way to this would be a good selling point to be as a vehicle for a new Switch that is like a more powerful Switch. So I want this to do really well, and I think there's like as James said, this looks really promising. Obviously, this is very early in like what they've shown us, but there's a lot of time to really fill in the void of like how you progress in this game. What does what does everything look like in this game when all is said and done? And yeah, I want this to. This looks really cool. This looks really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, go on, George.
No, okay, you go first.
I was going to say, like, one thing I think that people have picked up online is that this is a single-player game as well. And with Sword and Shield, like, I know it has its own fair share of issues anyway, but one of the real sort of like ugly points of it is when you go online in the wild area to participate in max raid battles and stuff, because it just chugs because it's trying to load in other players in your area. It's just terrible. So a single player experience would largely hopefully allow them to iron out some of that stuff. And when I rewatched the trailer after the presentation, I mean, I'm not really a techie kind of guy. I don't have a PC and I don't know like all these graphics cards and stuff and know everything in any great detail. But a lot of it is when, in the initial trailer they've shared yesterday, the things that I saw, I'm like, ooh, that's terrible, was just when there's like a Pokemon that you've encountered that's just popped in, and the actual like animation on it. I don't know if it's a frame rate thing or if it's just like the actual animation for that isn't finalized yet. But
you're talking about Chingling, huh?
Oh
yeah. Well, one of many. The Chimchar is quite bad as well. But yeah, that doesn't look like. Obviously, it's not finalized. We've got a long time to go. Well, a year. But that stuff, obviously, I understand the worry around that. But we don't know how old this footage is either. It could be that this is an early build, that they prepared the trailer a few months back, and then COVID has impacted the development. So, let's just use that trailer that we had ready to go in whenever.
And even if it is a really recent like build, they have a year.
Yeah, and also my sort of curved Pokeball to throw in here is I wonder if Game Freak may call on some sort of assistance with approaching this as an open world game.
Monolith Soft?
Exactly. See? Same wavelength. Purely because obviously Breath of the Wild wasn't solely Nintendo. They got a lot of assistance to sort of make sure that was as good as it could be. And Korok Forest is clearly a frame rate hellhole. But I wonder if there is some sort of assistance there that we're not aware of yet, where Game Freak is obviously the dominant developer, but they've got some help to make sure this is a reality. And the last thing I was going to say is this also has its own branding, Pokemon Legends, and obviously Arceus is the Pokemon. Just like Let's Go, I feel like this is sort of like, hey, here's a new idea. They'll release the game. I'm sure it'll do well. It's Pokemon. Everything seems to sell well still for Pokemon brand. But if it's something that maybe doesn't deliver on what people like, or they're not wholly keen on it, or the feedback is not as positive as they hoped, or whatever happens with it, like James said, this is them experimenting. This is their Final Fantasy 13 trilogy phase where they're just like, let's try this. Oh, let's try that.
I mean, I already know my feedback. If this doesn't pan out well, and like if they're asking for a wish,
at least they tried.
I already know my wish list is if they have like Monolith Soft like anywhere in development, or like bring them in and be like, all right, just make like Pokemon mechs, just design them like mechs, and then you enter the Pokemon.
I just found this tweet that goes into some symbolism for the starters chosen that's actually really interesting. So Hokkaido is like obviously got history with the Ainu people, and Oshawott, well, otters are significant in Ainu mythology, owls are important in Ainu tradition, and Cyndaquil is like the closest fire starter to like a volcano, and volcanic like stuff is important there too. So it's interesting if that's actually the case, and the starters might have been chosen to kind of coincide with Ainu stuff. That would be neat.
Well, another sort of weird thing is the lore of the Sinnoh region that people picked up on as well, is that ages back from Diamond and Pearl era, it was said that people used to marry Pokemon. So this could be the dating rom-com Pokemon game.
Oh God!
So I obviously doubt that's going to be in the game, but who knows?
You never know, man. This is experimental.
Like James said, I'm happy that this is something that people have been asking for since Breath of the Wild came out. They're like, why can't you do this to Pokemon? And this seems to be that sort of thing where you're in an open world. You seem to be able to go wherever you want. The Pokemon just seem to appear, obviously, in the overworld, for want of a better term. And my sort of like, I don't know, I didn't quite like the battle transitions in the trailer. There's a Pokemon there, and there's a part where they they're hiding in some like tall grass, and they throw a Pokeball, and it goes over the top of the Pokemon, but then it catches the Pokemon. I'm like, that you missed. This is just bad. And also the sort of transitions to battles, I'm not quite convinced about that yet. Like, I prefer the sort of like hard, you've bumped into Pokemon or you've chosen to battle it transition, rather than... It
might be interesting if they have it so that while you're battling a Pokemon, a more aggressive Pokemon in the background sees you and like joins in.
And then you have to run away like Xenoblade style, because it's like a level 100.
That reminds me. Another tweet I saw that was funny but also raises a good point is the existence of a dodge button implies that Pokemon will try and beat your ass.
I mean, the art style as well, I'm not... obviously, like we say, it's early in development. It seems very reminiscent of sort of Breath of the Wild, sort of like cell shady, sort of minimalist style. And I've seen a lot of people kind of look at the trainer characters, at the symbol on there. What's that body part called? Shoulder, whatever, around that area. And say that looks like it's a Team Galactic logo. And I'm like, really? Don't really see that connection. But the actual trainer characters just remind me of Greninja, to be honest, in a weird way. But they're all blue and they've got like a pink scarf on or something. But I don't know. It's promising. I think this is what the brand's needed for a while to, like you say, the sort of development cycle they've been on hasn't allowed probably for as much experimentation as...
It's not safe, which I think is the best thing it can't be right now.
Yeah, and my issue is that they seem to kind of add all these things in. You think, oh yes, it's really cool, Z moves, and then suddenly they're gone. And you're sort of like, okay, right. Mega Evolution, great, dropped.
Gigantamax.
Yeah, that's.
I want to see Gigantamax Samurott.
Well, this is the weird thing with the COVID era of our lives. All the competitive scenes obviously still playing online and stuff, but they're not competing at events, and the World Championships aren't going ahead. So if the Legends game is single player only, and Diamond and Pearl is this sort of probably only going to have the Pokédex, for that game, what the competitive game moving forward will still be Sword and Shield for at least until the end of 2022. So I don't know. Multiplayer has always been such a key part, even just trading with people in Pokemon, filling out your Pokédex, unless you're one of the people like me who buys both copies of the game. I just wonder how. I mean, I'm happy they're going back to sort of, if it is wholly single player adventure style game, but I wonder how much of an attraction it'll be for people if there's not that sort of other elements to it beyond that. I can't explain that more eloquently, but
no. Well, maybe I mean, like Pokemon Coliseum was a wholly single player, so maybe it's just kind of like that's the space that it wants to occupy. At least I think Coliseum was.
And the cadence of the games coming out as well. You've got potentially the remakes coming out in November, and then the Legends game is supposed to be early 2022. So is there something for November 2022 as well? Is Legends just sort of like a crossover point of, here's something new, try it out, let us know what you think? And then they've also got, I think Game Freak split into two teams. I don't know if they're all on this or not, or whatever, but...
I do wonder if with the whole deal with a different company, again, I forget their exact name, working on the Diamond and Pearl remakes, if they do make another Let's Go game, if that would be Game Freak themselves, if they would actually pawn it off to another developer like they've done here.
Just because that engine is now sort of set, they can call it sort of like, right, this worked for the LA remake, let's do a Johto one. Surely that's more straight. I mean, obviously, I'm not a developer, I don't understand all these things. Surely that's now slightly simpler than it was from scratch.
Yep.
And they would be able to sort of do that much more quickly. And if that is, what comes November 2022, obviously we've got 3 games coming out before then. But
obviously there's going to be like some sort of like other Pokemon game next year, though I wonder if that would be DLC maybe for like one of the, like either the Diamond and Pearl remakes making a Platinum or whatever for Legends, who knows. But the fact that we're seeing more than one major like quote unquote mainline Pokemon project in a single year does kind of open the floodgates a bit. What if 2022 also has a Let's Go, or 2023 has a Let's Go and a mainline, stuff like that? Yeah,
and Nintendo's obviously turned to other developers to sort of pad out their lineup, working quite closely with Koei Tecmo and Bandai Namco and stuff. And obviously, if Pokemon's starting to do this now, I mean, this year you've got new Pokemon Snap, which is Bandai Namco. You've got the Diamond Pearl remake, which is, I've forgotten the name as well.
Pokemon Conquest 2.
Is it ILAC? I can't remember what it's called. But I actually quite like that game. And then obviously you've got Game Freak themselves working on Legends. That starts to kind of give them a bit more of a healthier cadence to their games, because obviously crunch has been a big thing talked about a lot of games over the last, constantly, but over the last couple of years it's become a more prominent topic. Japanese developers
so you brought this up, but the Pokemon Presents did also show a little bit of footage of Pokemon Snap, new Pokemon Snap, which is coming out in April. I don't think there's a ton to say here. I think it kind of looks like what we all expected. They showed some cool features where you can like edit your photos once you take them. Obviously, they're graded by the professor. You can share them online.
It's still gonna be bullshit, isn't it? That new professor that's not Oak is still gonna be bullshit. It's like
where it's like perfectly centered, and he's like, if only you had centered it more. Like, what are you talking about?
That motherfucker! I'm ready to fucking hate his guts. All over
this new Pokemon Snap seems like it'll be a fun diversion for a few hours. Like the original game was not that long. Like you can do everything you can. So I wonder if this is going to be like the same scope or just enough to be like similar-ish. I don't know.
I think you move between different islands in this one, so that I can't speak to obviously how long the initial game will be, but I wonder if there'll be DLC for this over time, where they'll add another island that you can go to or something that's on the map.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. They can expand on this if they wanted to.
So, or you can go to another region. Like, oh, you've been around this new place that we've invented. I can't remember the name of it. But you can go around this area, or some DLC around different locations, different regions of.
You know what they're gonna do? They're gonna do some weird augmented reality shit. Like you can view your house through this camera.
Nintendo Labo VR is right there.
There you go.
And that feels like forever ago.
Yeah,
and also to this whole Pokemon stuff is that I seem to be the only one who cares about this, and I keep bringing it up. But that Post Malone song, they've obviously got the concert in like 2.5 hours, I think. And they released like the first track of it, which is "Only Want to Be With You," and it sounds incredible. Like, I don't know how Pokemon it is, and if it's just a song I enjoy, but
Katy Perry's done a song as well. So,
what? Yeah. That's sick.
Well, I mean, she's involved in the anniversary project, so I'm assuming she's done a song for it. But
that's awesome.
So
we'll find out later.
Who else has been involved with Pokemon? That's a celebrity. I was going to say Ariana Grande, but no, that's Final Fantasy. Pokemon.
Was that the mobile game?
Yeah, one of them, Exvius or whatever.
It feels inevitable that I guess the next step for them, for outside partnerships, like putting Pokemon into Fortnite.
Do you think Ariana Grande will be in Remake Part 2, or
one can hope, right?
She'll be in the PS6 exclusive downloadable content when Remake Part 2 comes out.
Lara Croft, and the guy from Deus Ex, and Rico Rodriguez from Just Cause Remake Part 2. My favorite fantasy character.
Oh no, I was about to say the assassin from Hitman, but not there anymore, is it?
I don't know. Nope. Has he shown up in Brave Exvius? If he has, then he's a Final Fantasy character.
Oh wait, were all the characters you rattled off in Brave Exvius?
Yep.
Wow.
I thought you were just going with Western Square Enix property.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it was legit.
Oh man, that's what I thought as well. Oh wow.
All right, so as we go on from Pokemon, we still have a ton left to talk about, and we're 2.5 hours in. So I think, just in the interest of not turning this into a 5-hour podcast, we're going to be a little bit more rapid fire for some of these. So in some of these, we might introduce, get a comment or two, or our initial response, and then move on, just because that's how everything ended up lining out this week. And then if anything has significant follow-up, we can obviously retouch back on it. It doesn't have an expiration date in future weeks. So this is going to be a bit different for the podcast. Rapid fire mode. All right. So outside of the planned announcements this week from the State of Play and the Pokemon Direct / Presents, we got some sour news kind of on the Western RPG front. Starting off with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. This was originally supposed to release last year, it then got delayed into this year. Long story short, it is delayed out of this year, and on top of that, the kicker is that it is no longer being developed by Hardsuit Labs, which was the developer under Paradox that had been working on it for the last few years. And this is coming a few months off the heels of a lot of the original writing staff no longer being on the project. It's just a messy, soupy situation all around for Bloodlines 2.
It is the definition of vaporware right now.
It's so weird because when this game was first announced, they had this big ARG announcement leading up to it. They were doing weekly or bi-weekly marketing, introducing the clans, and people were like, "Oh, I wonder if my favorite clan from the original game."
Even for pre-order, you could pay money for this game, and to get.
They talked about the gold editions and all that, and then it feels like every couple months another wheel would come off, and now we're wheelless. We're skidding on the tracks or off the tracks.
This is I don't know. This is in line with Dying Light 2 and Dead Island 2,
And well, unfortunately, it's also in line with the original Bloodlines, where Troika Games ended up shutting down right after it released. And that game, if you I know it has a cult following and does some things really well, but you can feel that game coming apart at the seams as you go through it. And
does this game come out? That's a big question. Does this game come out?
Does it come out?
I don't know if you mentioned, but did they explain why the developer's been shunted and got rid of?
only in marketing speak.
Okay.
Let's see. Let me actually pull up the quote. Our studio organization in particular has found it difficult to maintain the usual production pace. We have therefore chosen to postpone planned releases. This also affects the development of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. We've now chosen to postpone the release of the game further. It just says Hardsuit Labs will no longer be leading the development of Bloodlines 2. We have started a collaboration with a new studio partner to finish work on the game. No other details than that. So,
Who knows?
very, very up in the air. Yeah, this is. I have a soft. I don't love the original game, but I think it is interesting and does a lot of cool, interesting, compelling things. It would have been cool to see a version of that kind of polished up to modern standards with a little bit more ambition and a little bit of a more steady foundation. It sounds like we're not at least getting that second thing. I'm going to say it still comes out, but like if it's just like dragging itself across the finish line and it's an awful project that no one wants, that still counts.
I guess. I don't know. I mean, it's a weird question of like if this is an if or when situation now.
Yeah. We also got news on a similar, not quite the same front, that BioWare has stopped development on quote unquote Anthem Next. So obviously over the last several years, they have been underway trying to, and they've openly stated this, they've been trying to see what they can do to revitalize Anthem in the vein of something like No Man's Sky. And then it had kind of adopted the title Anthem Next. It's no longer happening. So Anthem will still exist as it currently does, but like the current live service will remain running, but there is no more development on Anthem. So it's released in 2019 is how it will stay.
It sucks because I forgot the individual's name who left BioWare a few months back, but he was in charge of like keeping like a blog of like the ideas they had and concepts they had for Anthem Next and showing like kind of the ongoing builds that they were having of things behind the scenes of what they were kind of leaning towards. And that there's a lot of promising cool stuff of like, kind of going back to skill trees and skill points and integrating them back into the game and how they were gonna tackle itemization and whatnot. And like it sounded like okay, it was pretty cool. As someone who played the entire game and beat the entire game before it officially launched to the masses, like there were definitely like there was merit to that game, like especially with the flight mechanics. It didn't come together all that well, but there were cool ideas, and it's hard to care at this point.
Two work colleagues, we were looking for a multiplayer game to play together, and one of my colleagues, very dependent on his Game Pass subscription on Xbox for games rather than having to buy things. And when EA Play, whatever it's called now, they did change the name. I think it went from EA Access to EA Play. When that got added to Game Pass, we looked at everything and tried to work out what to play, and Anthem was the game we chose. And we played it through from start to finish, and like you say, there's lots of great stuff in there. It just falls into repetition quite heavily a lot of the time, and some very weird moments of pacing where the quests you have to do are a bit... and also, one thing that frustrated us was, unless all three of us had the right quest, we'd go off thinking we all had that quest, but then we'd all do it, and then obviously the progress wouldn't be synchronized because one person didn't actually have it. We'd have to go back and replay that quest. So I mean, that's not unique to Anthem, but it happens in things like Destiny as well. But
Monster Hunter struggles with that too a little bit.
Yeah, but that sort of coloured our experience or soured our experience a bit. But we really enjoyed. Well, we played it through and persevered and enjoyed as much as we could from it. Although the ending, I don't know if you remember the ending.
I remember the ending.
But the last boss is just, I don't know, it's the weirdest.
Booty. It's like that gigantic creature thing, right?
We didn't even wipe its whole health bar. It's like the opposite of me playing Brave Default 2. We didn't even wipe its whole health bar, and then the game just ended. And we were like, is that it? Is that the end of the game? And we, what? And the credits started and everything. We were like, oh.
Yeah, there's like a post-credits scene that like, that
it sets up a
narrative. Yeah, like a new arc or new story. And then that never came to be because of the way the game shipped and how it was received. It's just on one hand, it's a shame, but on the other hand, it's kind of like wipe your hands clean of this too.
I just wondered. My perspective on this whole approach to sort of like looking to revitalize it or reboot it or whatever was always that why this Anthem as it is now tarnished by reputation. I don't think it would have attracted a lot of players to come back to it. But
there's always that hope, in the industry, ever since you saw what happened with FF14 Realm Reborn.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting the Final Fantasy 14 sort of effect to happen, where something the product is rebooted and then suddenly, oh wow, everything's clicking now, and everyone. Final Fantasy 14 to me now is one of the best Final Fantasy games, even though I still need to catch up. I always wonder why they didn't just try and if they saw merit in the idea and EA wanted to have a live service game like that, why they didn't just sort of work towards a sequel and sort of see that as a sort of a reset point of the fact that building towards that rather than sort of having to scrap around and overhaul the whole game. But I don't know, I'm not behind the scenes on that to know.
Yeah.
Well, remember rapid fire, so
well, yeah,
we're just kind of using our thoughts now,
maybe they can get ILAC to
one final thing that they did mention in the announcement of this cancellation of any future work on Anthem is that they do say moving forward we're going to laser focus our efforts on Dragon Age, Mass Effect, and Star Wars: The Old Republic. So for those people still playing that, which I've always wanted to get into but haven't.
I hear it's still doing well. So
speaking of Dragon Age, go ahead, CD. One more thing.
I was just going to say as a quick thing. I always wanted to play Star Wars: The Old Republic, but it's only on PC. And I can't play it on anything else. You can't play on anything else, and I can't play it on anything I've got.
Well, I feel like when it released, that was before a lot of ground had been broken by mostly Final Fantasy 14, but also like ESO being very Elder Scrolls Online, that is, being very console centric. Well, I guess there's also Phantasy Star has been on console this whole time. So maybe I'm that's not a correct statement, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see more MMOs try to be cross.
Nice rapid fire, Brian. I'm just kidding.
Yes. All right, Dragon Age. We have reports. So there was a lot of EA news this week that kind of also fell out of this. They talked about how Gaia has been canceled, which was a next gen project that they had been working on.
With Motive Studio, that was the Motives project.
But the key thing for our coverage is that there is a reinforced focus on the next Dragon Age. Will be a single player RPG and will no longer have multiplayer aspects. I'm reading a report from The Verge where it says it has been turned into a single player. Oh, originally, yeah, okay. I don't have the original article up, but apparently, this is legitimately a change in focus where it was going to have multiplayer aspects, but then in the recent months it has shifted to be a single player game, which I think most of us are thinking yeah, maybe Mass Effect multiplayer was better than we gave it credit for, and Dragon Age multiplayer was okay. But if you're going to laser focus on something, and if BioWare really needs a hit, this seems like the right decision.
This is genuine.
This is but they mentioned in the Bloomberg article that it was largely the two biggest factors behind this decision of making the next Dragon Age be single player only, which is absurd to vocalize, but there's the state of things. It was originally going to be a live service game, now a single player only game, and that was due to one Jedi Fallen Order being a massive success as a single player only game. So thank God for that. Thank you Respawn, for that. It sold very well, and also because of the unsuccess of Anthem, as we just discussed earlier. So they're we don't want to have a repeat of that. So give us your best efforts. Now that we have on paper, the financials say that a single player only game can be successful and drive in a lot of profit.
Did Dragon Age have multiplayer before? A previous game?
There was multiplayer modes. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Never knew that. Huh? Wow. Okay.
I'm pretty sure there was, right? My memory isn't crazy, right? I'm thinking Inquisition. I think there was. You could have a single second player, I think.
Oh yeah. Inquisition did have multiplayer.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Right, rapid fire. Couple sales updates here. NieR Automata, which just turned 4, has surpassed 5.5 million shipments. which I think is, how much to say other. Wait, what?
Absolutely insane. I never, like, before it came out, I never would have even guessed it would sell much more than 1 million, even like with the most optimistic like guess.
Yeah, and it seems like it's far surpassed our expectations. It might be the reason we're getting a NieR remaster. Maybe not might, probably is the reason we're getting a NieR remaster this year.
It is now considered, like, they mentioned it like a few months back. I forgot how far back, but like the NieR brand and internally in Square Enix is like now it's like looked at and treated as like a premium brand. It's just crazy to fucking think about.
Where before it was just Yoko Taro's little pet project. It's like, oh, you work on that NieR thing, Taro. Do it. They're like, oh, wait a minute, we should pay attention to what you're doing.
Yeah.
The other update on a similar vein is that Octopath Traveler has sold 2.5 million, which I still think like is for the style of game that is, for the throwback that it is, for how much it's banking on nostalgia, and it's PC Switch only.
It's pretty good.
Also,
it's really good.
Yeah, pretty damn good.
And that's probably why they greenlit that Project Triangle strategy. It's like, hey, do this HD 2D thing again.
We got the announcement that Void Terrarium, which is a game that we did a YouTube video on last year, a roguelike from NieS. Who? Is that the right publisher? Nipponichi.
Yeah,
NieS America, same game. All right, it's coming out for PlayStation 5 on May 18th in America and May 21st in Europe. So just a kind of a fun, cool, independent project. It's a kind of like it's just a game that exists where it's not part of a franchise, not part of an existing IP, just a couple fun ideas. It's a roguelike, so it does have some of that. If you have stepped through the gateway of Hades or whatever, and you want to play more different styles of roguelikes, well, here's Void Terrarium coming out for PS5. George. We also have the Caligula Effect 2 is heading west in the fall of 2021 for PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch. So this was a weird game that was announced alongside the Direct, but only in the Japanese version. So it's kind of weird that here a week later we get the official localization announcement. But hey, here it is. So we kind of talked about the announcement of this last week. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, it's weird that's not coming to PC because the Caligula Effect Overdose, the remake of the first game, is on PC.
Well, to be fair, that PC port was done by NIS America, so like they'll probably announce it later if it does end up happening. Because keep in mind, this announcement for Caligula Effect 2 comes before it's even out in Japan.
That's true. And yeah, I get. Sure, I guess. I mean, apparently people wanted this, so I guess, sure.
Monster Hunter Rise is, I think this was heavily speculated or leaked, but we have some confirmation through it.
Yeah, it was leaked with that whole like Capcom mega leak. We haven't really talked about it because, well, obviously, I mean, that information was gathered illegally, but now it's confirmed, so we can say, yeah, we knew it was coming. We knew it was probably going to be 2022. Now it's official.
Not to bury the lead, this is Monster Hunter Rise coming to PC. I was about to say it, and then I think you jumped in to say it, but then no one actually said it. Monster Hunter Rise. It's coming out for Switch in the end of March, but will also be coming to PC in 2022. So I think this is obviously a smart move, seeing how well World smashed Capcom records on Steam. So it seems like a no-brainer. Hopefully it means that, well, I guess it means that inevitably they're going to have this weird PC delay again. I guess, unless it launches on PC with everything that the Switch version gets by that point next year. But I know that was kind of a thorn in the side of PC Monster Hunter players for a long time.
They hate PC players. That's what it is, man.
Yeah, it's discrimination. What were we going to say, George?
It's a shame that it's not coming to consoles. Like, consoles besides Switch, I mean. If it's coming to PC...
Don't you guys have Switches?
Come on now.
Plus, honestly, the fact that this game is being targeted towards Switch means that theoretically there's way more people on PC that will be able to play it, because World was a pretty heavy game, not just on the GPU but even the CPU. So hopefully Rise, more PCs should be able to handle it.
I'm just surprised they confirmed it before the Switch version's out, in the sense of usually you get that initial launch.
I have a quick question.
Even though
I thought you were going to say the developers would be very coy about it and like equivocate, like, it's not. There's no plan.
I mean, it's gonna sell obviously gangbusters on Switch anyway because especially
Monster Hunter
Japan.
does.
it's sort of a good fit. I'm just glad obviously with Rise we're actually getting a from the ground up Switch game rather than Generations Ultimate, which was sort of like a bit of a stopgap for this basically. Wonder if it will have cross-platform support, Switch versus PC teaming up. Yeah, Rampage.
I don't think so. Just because if you look at the series history on Nintendo handhelds, there's probably going to be some like Nintendo crossover stuff, like your Palico and I guess your what's the name for the
Palamute.
K9 Palamute. That's all right. I'm sure there's going to be stuff like that. So if that's the case, kind of hard to see Nintendo agreeing to there being cross-play or cross-save. Yeah.
Turn your Palamute into Yoshi.
That'd be great.
It's gonna happen, man.
Just going to be the most cursed thing in existence since the Assassin's Creed Origins Chocobo.
Oh, the Choco Horse. Oh god, I'd almost scrubbed that from my brain. Thank you.
It was sick. It was a Choco camel, wasn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
Was it a camel? Oh, damn.
Yeah,
I just remember it had 4 legs.
It looks even worse than you remember.
Jeez. All right, we're pushing up against 3 hours here. Sony and kind of dour news on their front because we gotta balance the good with the bad. They are downsizing Japan studio and focusing it around Team Asobi, who is the studio behind Astrobot. So this was originally kind of reported by Bloomberg late last year, and a lot of people didn't give it a lot of credit or a lot of merit, and they thought it was just kind of fear mongering. But it turns out that it seems to be the case. So this was originally focused. This was originally published in a VGC article, and then kind of substantiated and backed up by another Bloomberg article. And yeah, it just seems like a bummer because Japan studio behind obviously like Demon Souls and Bloodborne and Gravity Days / Rush. So kind of a lot of
so that's the weird thing about Japan studio. It's their oldest first party studio, but a lot of the output from Japan studio, they were like a co-producer or a producer almost, because a lot of their output wasn't them like in-house. It's like stuff like Ape Escape was them in-house, but things like Bloodborne they were part of, but that was from Software,
right,
and whatnot. So I mean, it's a bitter pill to swallow because a lot of like early great RPGs from the PlayStation brand came from that. You think of Ark the Lad, you think of Wild Arms, they were a part of that, and
then of course
Gravity Rush,
Shadow of the
obviously.
Colossus too, right? And that's not an RPG, but
Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, obviously that was Ueda's team who split off, but they were part of that initial development and the original versions of that game.
I think we need to pour one out for Knack and Knack 2 as well.
It's right, and a lot of the Vita, the cool Vita shit, like Soul Sacrifice Delta, Freedom Arms, or what was it?
Freedom Wars and Tainted Bloodlines.
Yeah.
There was a lot of really neat Japan Studio stuff on Vita this last generation, but not enough on PS4. I understand why, because obviously the Japanese audience was on the Vita, but I feel like that unfortunately kind of sealed their fate once Sony became much more of an Americanized company. Because if there's more of a focus on the consoles, there's that disconnect, and it just led to issues.
This would feel less bad if they could re-release some of their library in modern systems, like some of my favorites that aren't popular, like Jeanne d'Arc on PSP, really great game. Folklore on PS3, which was one of the rare instances where the 6-axis was used for utilized effectively well.
It was actually good.
It was actually pretty good. I would love that. But you saw you saw things falling apart, like as time went on, especially when Sony when they refocused their like central efforts on like America, like that's where the HQ is now or whatever. Like when you saw like talent, like the Gravity Rush person like leaving a few months back, you saw more and more Japan studio like leaving, and then you saw like their IPs even kind of being waysided like into mobile, like Arc the Lad and Wild Arms like became mobile gacha games. Arc the Lad is still up, but I think the Wild Arms one shut down. And whatnot. It's a shame, like because you think about like really great PlayStation RPGs, and Japan Studio was behind or involved with in some way a good amount of them, and now it's just Team Asobi does really great work with Astrobot and whatnot. I really enjoyed that launch game that came with the PS5, but
oh yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
There's even the classic stuff like Echo Chrome back on PS3. I really like that stuff.
Yeah, that was a brilliant game.
I just don't know why. I mean, obviously, there's all business reasons behind it, and they know what their financials are like more than we would ever do. But I just wonder if they just move down the path of more download, smaller project stuff.
It's weird because you think about like obviously Sony wants their first party stuff right now to be mega hits like God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us Part 2 and whatnot. They want all of those to be mega hits, and it's hard to like it's hard to like guarantee like, hey, you bring the Gravity Rush person over and you give you imagine the behind the scenes meeting was like, hey, we'll give you another Gravity Rush game, but can you guarantee us a sales target of like the same as God of War?
Like that, where you're like, it's a high bar for Gravity Rush.
It's absolutely fucked though when even the Everybody's Golf folks now have to branch out and make their own version of the game.
Yeah. Fuck, but at least we got PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale though. Oh, what a game!
What a saving grace!
I'm pretty sure the only reason that Asobi is still doing well is that they're going to want to have another Astrobot game as a launch title for PSVR 2.
Yep. Yeah, I was about to say the same thing.
Which, you know what? Fine. I mean, Astrobot, they're great games. Like, the VR game's really good. Obviously, everyone that's played Playroom, it's like probably one of the best PS5 games still. That's not to disparage the rest of the PS5 library. It's still solid for like the first like couple of launch months. But yeah, I hope they're able to do more than that. But it seems pretty clear that their main focus is going to be Astrobot for the foreseeable future.
Playroom was just such a showcase of what PS5 can be with the controller and all that kind of stuff. And none of the other, I mean, you've got great games. Demon's Souls Remake, solid. Spider-Man's obviously great, but there's nothing really else that has that sort of creative spark in the same way, which is why I think I kind of will miss Japan studio working at a larger scale, because I always look to them for the more kind of quirky, I didn't realize I like this game sort of moments. But obviously that also feeds into the fact that no one really bought them because they didn't realize how good all that stuff was.
And like, why does Sony need their own internal studio to make these weird experimental games when they can just have indies or probably in their minds spend much less money to guarantee timed exclusivity or console exclusivity for indies and basically have the same impact?
Yeah, that's the name on my head there, unfortunately. Yeah.
Which from a business standpoint, I understand, but man, the main reason I loved PlayStation was because of those smaller tier Japanese games.
I'm with you, man. I'm totally with you. They were so creative.
I think that's the issue, isn't it? It's a loss of identity rather than a that whole stable of games is no longer there, and it's now all, like you say, these Western blockbusters that are taking.
In their own right, they're very good. Believe me, they're really good.
It's probably good. It probably is definitely good for their bottom line. Otherwise, they wouldn't be making that choice. But it's just a bummer for those of us that have the attachments with those Japan studio titles.
And don't get me wrong, there's still a bunch of great games coming out of Sony, and I'm excited for Returnal. Like how Housemarque has some pretty good stuff. Well, Housemarque has some really good stuff. It looks interesting. Obviously, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, that's going to be fantastic. Honestly, Sony buying Insomniac was one of the smartest things they've done. But yeah, I mean, there's still some great stuff coming, and I don't think it's near their Sony's library is nearly as homogenized as people have been making it out to be. But on the flip side, I saw somebody say that as of right now, it feels like maybe Microsoft has a more varied first-party lineup than Sony does now. And when you look at them, it's like, yeah, Microsoft hasn't released these games yet, but from purely a variety standpoint, they might have a point now. And it's like a weird flip-flop from like the end of the PS3 360 generation to now. And it's like, man, that's just really
Hey,
weird.
what was that? What was that multiplayer game that they showed off at State of Play?
The multiplayer game that showed off the state. Which type of multiplayer game?
Knockout City.
Knockout City, yeah.
That was actually first revealed in the Nintendo Direct.
Yeah, it's EA. That's EA.
I didn't know if if that was a Sony thing. Not really.
Honestly, it actually looks pretty interesting. I might play a bit of that, but I do think it's not free to play. It's like a $20 purchase, so who knows how. Yeah. I mean, crossplay will probably mean that it has a somewhat active player base. So thank God for that. But I don't know how long it will be like active.
It's a one-off $20 price with no season passes, so you could just pay $20 and then that's it.
Well, the only reason I brought it up is I was thinking of quirky Sony games. Like, hey, what was that one game they showed State of Play? Oh, and it's not even really a Sony game. Never mind.
Yeah.
But it's like, man, think of like Microsoft now. They didn't really publish the medium, but that was like a console exclusive. They've got Halo Infinite coming out. They've got Avowed coming out. There's Forza Horizon, those games, regular Forza. They've got Killer Instinct if they ever make a new one of them. There's
I know Psychonauts 2 is going to be multiplat, but they've got Double Fine and everything that comes with that in terms of quirky, interesting games.
The sort of like
they've got Bethesda. Bethesda alone has a more varied lineup than Sony first party these days.
And the whole thing as well is that all these studios now within Microsoft's portfolio, all those games will be on Game Pass day one digitally. So if you don't care about physical copies, you can just sub to Game Pass and get all these games, which is crazy. Because as a financial, perspective to that, I still don't understand how Game Pass is profitable. But never mind, that's another conversation.
I still feel that we have to wait a couple of years because a lot of it is still potential. Like, man, Indiana Jones game sure looks good, but is it going to actually be good? Starfield has a good premise, but is it actually going to be good? Who knows? I sure hope Obsidian's got something up their sleeve with Avowed. Is it actually good? Like it's a bunch of potential at this point.
Oh, totally. Like, even if it looks like Microsoft's variety in their output's going to be better than Sony in a few years, like we don't know anything about the quality. Like Sony stuff, even if the variety isn't going to be as high, obviously, even at this point, pretty much every first-party game that Sony puts out is going to be a good time. Even Days Gone, like it was maybe not the best like reception when it first came out, but like gave it a few months, got a bunch of updates, and pretty much everyone I know that personally played it really enjoys it now. So who knows?
And I was just going to throw in there that I can see someone, a company like Bethesda, Microsoft might choose to have all those games on PS5 as well. So we don't necessarily know how the Bethesda deal will shape up over the years to come, if it's going to remain like all these games are now Xbox exclusive, or they're going to have the approach of all that stuff still being multi-platform, even though they are a Microsoft-owned studio or network studio.
That they're going to be Xbox exclusive because
I guess we'll have to check back in March or whenever that thing is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Reason I think that is because they have obviously xCloud, so they can say, well, you don't have to buy an Xbox to play it. You can just play it streamed on your phone.
Yeah, unless the xCloud app is the part that becomes the Trojan horse on Switch, and maybe PS5 if Sony allowed it. Probably wouldn't, but
it's okay. All the Xbox players and I can meet up at the FF7 Battle Royale. We all have phones.
Playing as Ariana Grande.
Hell yeah.
Anyway.
All right, I do have 3 more things to talk about here that are just gonna. Our rapid fire was a moderate success, maybe. Who knows? We've got System Shock Remake, which has been kind of in development limbo for a while now. It's got a playable demo available on Steam and I think Epic as well. So that is something I didn't realize. It was like the System Shock remake has been something that's kind of been like in the background for like years now. I feel like it's like, yeah, it's coming at some point. Yeah, they're working on it slowly. And the fact that now I'm told, oh, the game's coming out this summer and I can play a demo now, like I'm finally like perking up and being like, wait, I should try this. Because I've never played System Shock, but it seems like I've played a ton of like modern immersive sims.
It's a cool game.
Yeah, so I've played like everything that it's inspired. Like, so now I got to play the inspiration point. What were you saying, James?
Don't mind me just downloading that demo now.
Yeah, this from just a refresher. This from Night Dive Studios, and also I think this is new. They announced that there will be an Amazon Luna version at launch as well whenever this comes out, and that the pre-orders are just for $45. It's not a full $60, $70 product. It's $45. And I think pre-orders also get the updated the System Shock 2 Enhanced Edition as a freebie on that pre-order.
We've also got an announcement that another Eden, The Cat Beyond Time and Space, is coming to PC on Steam this spring. Josh, tell me about another Eden.
Yeah, I've talked about this game like way long ago when I used to play it on mobile. This is obviously a PC port coming to Steam of an RPG, free to play RPG that was released on iOS and Android several years ago. This is the spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger. So Masato Kato is handling the scenario. Yasunori Mitsuda does the musical, like the main theme for the game and whatnot. I think for other music compositions that you have the Shunsuke Tsuchiya from Luminous Arc 2 is also on board for that. But I've already expressed, way back when I used to play the mobile version, that this is probably one of the best like free-to-play games in that space. Obviously, its downfalls come from like it has a gacha system. You gacha for characters in it, but you do get like the main cast as you progress through the story, and they're like good enough to get through like the part one story arc of that game, which is like 40 plus hours anyway, and whatnot. It does like a complete conclusive tale, and then as more story expansions go along, they amp up the power level. But it's a cool turn-based RPG. It's really cool to see them make the move to Steam, because like I don't think it operates very well with a touchscreen, because you have to slide your finger back and forth to go through the environments and whatnot. It's not really that engaging, just operating with touch control. I think it'll also allow you to transfer your mobile progress into the Steam version. Just they have like you can like create like a transfer code and a password, and you can do that. So it's also cool because if this is like the most updated version of the game, there are permanent collaborations with Persona 5 and the Tales of series in that game as well. And unlike other gacha games and other free-to-play mobile titles that have like limited time collaborations with other things, they're only up there for like maybe 1 or 2 weeks, while this game is like, no, we'll just make them permanent. They're always going to be there for you to access at any time, which is very
cool.
It's
like Terra Battle in Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah. So anyone who's
it also did have a Switch port announced several years back, 2018. No news on that, but it hasn't been canceled, so might end up on Switch as well soon, maybe.
Yeah. Like I've been kind of keeping up when keeping my like with them and seeing like they have like these anniversary streams, like obviously every year, seeing is there any update to that Switch port? Where's the Switch port? And then they like haven't acknowledged it ever since. They're saying, we're working on it, but like nothing else outside of that. So maybe one day, this will pop up on Switch and whatnot, and then you can have another way to engage with Persona 5 content that's not actually Persona 5 on the Switch like that. But it's cool. Like anyone who really likes like PS1 era RPGs that likes the concept of time travel stories, like there's free to play, give it a shot, see if it's for you. Obviously I'm not gonna like actively recommend it because it's a gacha game, it's take it or leave it at that point. But it's pretty cool. I like it.
And the last real RPG note that I have on here, or maybe not really an RPG, but we have an announcement that sci-fi, I guess I do title it an RPG, sci-fi social deduction RPG Gnosia, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, will launch for Gnosia will launch for Nintendo Switch on March 4th. It's originally released on Vita and Switch back in 2019 in Japan. So it'll be. Go ahead, James.
I'm excited for this because it got a 10 out of 10 from IGN Japan, and everyone that I know that's played the import really, really enjoyed it. Shame the Vita version isn't getting localized, so with the fact that Nintendo announced it, I'm sure that they've gotten support from Nintendo for the localization. Makes sense to me. Very excited.
Yeah. I heard that. I heard this is oddly enough. This was described to me as like anime Among Us, but like imagine it's like an Among Us premise, but there's like a heavy narrative to surrounding it, like trying to find out like who's the killer, or like I think there's even an element of like you can choose to like be one of the humans trying to find the killer, like it's like an alien or thing or some entity, and or like going from the perspective of the killer itself, and you're trying to obviously kill enough humans so you outnumber the surviving humans, just like, you know, like any, not even just Among Us, but, you know, like Mafia, Werewolf, those kind of games and whatnot. I'm really excited. I'm very excited. Like James said, a lot of people I've talked to who played this game, and obviously the IGN Japan review, have very high praise. I'm always down for like almost like a Zero Escape-esque narrative type of scenario. It has such a distinct look and style. I love the art direction, character design.
It's March 4th, so like literally less than a week. Next Thursday.
Yeah, I'm psyched. I want to give it a look.
It's my birthday. Don't tell anybody.
Oh shit! And happy birthday to Alex.
I'll buy it to myself as a present.
Oh, okay, let's all play it together.
Do you know how much it is? Do you know how much it is?
$25
USD though. I don't know about the your.
It's probably about £20. And
I mean, that's not bad. Like, I mean, I know that on the Japanese like PSN, it was like 3,500 yen or something like that. So,
I mean, like, think about it like this, Alex. Like, it could be worse. You could be charging $60 for Sword HD,
or Kingdom Hearts 2.8 or whatever it was,
or $80 for Eternal?
Oh yeah, it's like $70 for Eternal. Yeah,
I'm still not used to $70 basic editions.
It's £70 for us, which is a lot of money.
That is, yeah.
That's
so
more
lucky.
dollars.
Sony is so lucky that I trust that developer to make a good game. They're so fucking lucky.
Man, I really like Housemarque. I just that price tag is such a big pill to swallow for that. I really like the look of the game too. I really like everything that they've shown. It's like, yeah, this is awesome. And then you hear the price tag, it's like, no fucking way.
I guess the thing is that Sony prices will drop over time, where Nintendo prices typically hold their price for whatever reason. I don't know why. Surely it's down to the retailer, not Nintendo, but who knows? So Skyward Sword will always be $60, but Returnal will probably drop to a point where you're happier to buy it.
I don't know. It might take a while because like Sony knows that the number of PS5 owners is going to be limited for a while. So why have price drops when anyone that actually has a PS5 would have had to gone through hell and high water just to get a system? That sort of dedicated consumer, $70? Shit. Not a big deal.
I'm still trying to get a DualSense charging station, and they're out of stock. So
yeah.
I don't know.
I need to get a PS5 before a UP episode at some point. The very last piece of news that I will throw in here right before we wrap up is it is official. E3 as a physical event this year is canceled. It will be a digital showcase, if anything. Though even then, they've got to get publishers on board, which I don't know if that's a hard sell, because why do that when you can just do what Sony and Pokemon and Nintendo have done the last 3 weeks and control it yourself? I guess that's my mindset. But yeah, no E3 this year.
Let's convince
it makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that it wasn't going to happen because we've had all the major players really doing their own like screen stuff. Like obviously Bethesda Bethesda hasn't, but that doesn't matter. They're part of Microsoft now, so they'll just be with whatever Microsoft shows off. Obviously,
even
Sony has their
like
own stuff.
Nippon have done their own things.
Yeah, just like even like this upcoming week, you have this New Game Plus Expo for kind of the mid-level publishers of like localization teams of Japanese games, usually conglomerate now, and show off their announcements. Like there's like smaller events that like and venues that they'll obviously find an audience for that. So who knows? I mean, maybe let's just convince our like big boss Alex to get an RPG site virtual booth at this year's E3 and pay the big bucks,
And then get a VTuber.
Oh, ooh, I like that. Let's go. Let's do it.
By the way, just to talk a little bit about how this came about, it was an internal PowerPoint presentation where one of the slides was giving conventions on the books in LA. E3 2021 is listed as a canceled live event in 2021, working with production team on broadcast options from LA Live or the LA Convention Center, working on the 22 and 23 license. So that's where this all came from. It's from LA like tourism documents.
I think my main thought is just that I like the concentrated dose that E3 offers, that everything happens within just a week and a half, because usually it's not a pure week. But last year for me was the complete opposite of what I wanted. I don't mind them doing. I don't mind them doing their own individual things, or the different publishers. Absolutely don't mind that at all if that's what they want to do this year. I just hope it's more concentrated into a few weeks rather than the never-ending
April through September.
Jeff Keighley is clearly cornering a position for himself with the Game Awards, and was it Summer Games Fest? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Summer Gaming.
It's like 4 months, and it was just like, I don't need this to be.
Well, luckily,
he's already confirmed it's going to start earlier, and it's going to be shorter. It's going to only be within like what,
a month? I think
2 weeks. I think
2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I understand obviously with the promotional side of it, like Steam sales and all that kind of thing that they want to sort of tack onto it. But obviously, for I don't know if it was the same for you guys, I found it really hard to know when the next stream was. Is it relevant to me? Do I need to watch it? What time is it on? All that kind of stuff.
It was definitely a mess last year, and it didn't help that like you also had like those last minute announcements that were announced like before the day of, like, oh yeah, by the way, we're doing this tomorrow. It's like, wait, what? The fucker? Okay, I guess.
And you had the more agile, prominent sort of websites, and I'm talking about IGN, PC Gamer, all that kind of stuff, who stepped in a much more efficient way than ESA did. To sort of like prop up events last year with everything going on. Obviously, like the whole of last year has been a mess anyway for everybody.
Yeah.
But
it definitely was like a wake up call to be like, hey, this is our chance to pivot away from the ESA as much as we can, because as much as everyone enjoys E3 from outside, like internally, like ESA is not popular behind the scenes. Let's say.
I'm pretty sure literally everyone here that's been to E3 hates the ESA's guts after they outright doxed us.
Well, yeah.
So, and obviously, our site where we all work remotely and we all do this from our own places, it is nice to have opportunities like E3 to meet up, because there is kind of an intangible benefit to be able to do that. But it's not going to happen, at least not this year, not at E3. So next time, maybe PAX Prime or PAX West.
Well, either way, like even if they had a physical event, which wouldn't be great at all, like we all have to wait for it to be safe again. Make sure we, when we meet up, make sure it's like totally, things are safe again.
I think we passed the inflection point in terms of COVID. Speaking very generally, not in terms of like a metric of whatever, but yeah, it seems like this year is just going to be another coda to last year in terms of live events.
Yeah, I think this is the back to normal, new normal year this year, where things towards the end of the year will start to get back to how they were, and restrictions and things. I don't know what it's like in the US at the moment, but for us, certainly. So I think 2022 will be the point when things, depending on what happens with the ESA and what they want to do with E3, will then reach our expectation again of, but I don't know.
Well, let's see if even what I'm curious just to see what the hell happens with this digital event. It might crash and burn just as spectacularly if no one's on board with it. So maybe reconvene in June just to see what the heck happens there this year.
But if the ESA coordinated all the publishers and said, look, we can't have a physical event again at the convention center. So what we want to do is you have all of your presentations like you normally would, but then we'll offer some sort of developer Zoom call talks or something, I don't know, around that.
Some sort of packaging for it, yeah.
Yeah, that could work. I think the thing that probably is starting to turn off a lot of companies is the amount of money it costs to actually
Right.
go to E3. Like that we're completely oblivious to all the budgets of, but the things we do here are a bit alarming for how much it actually costs, especially for smaller developers as well that don't get those big budgets. But I don't know. I think if they could just consolidate everything into a couple of weeks, sort of like it is E3, but you can watch it from home kind of thing. Well, I mean, everyone watches it. Most people watch it from home anyway, but like you just watch it from home this year and you have to go there. That could work. But I saw Reggie Fils-Aimé was saying that the big thing that E3 digitally lacks is obviously people experiencing games. I don't know how you get around with that, but there was obviously talks of like Stadia and stuff being quite useful for stuff like that. Where you shove the demo on.
I mean, like the only the most feasible way to do that, I feel like that's been done is those Steam demo festivals, those limited time festivals.
Yeah, which is the sort of thing where Jeff Keighley stepped in and came up with an answer before the ESA could get to it themselves.
And that's it. That's also that's a different problem as well for E3 because a lot of publishers when they present like E3 demos, usually it's like it's a vertical slice of a game like in development, and the people who are attending for professional purposes like have that understanding of like how games are made, and that's difficult to convey to the masses of like, hey, there's a work in development. This is clearly not done as an early build of a game, and like it can be done in Steam demo festivals because it's like an indie focus, indie publisher, and there's like that precedent early access. But it feels like it's much more difficult if you're asking like.
Well, look how careful CD Projekt was with Cyberpunk, where on every single one of their trailers they like slathered it with work in project, final product, whatever, and then
people were like, no, what the fuck, and that's a different problem altogether as well.
Well, people take marketing as promises.
Yeah.
Where if something is different from what was shown in a demo or in a trailer, it's not, the game was just under development. It's, the publisher lied. And in some cases that's true, but in some cases I don't think it's as clear cut. It's very, I don't think there's any rule where you can say like you always have to treat a piece of marketing this way or that way.
And remember that also in E3 game demos, there are some demos where you're just like guided by a person by you because like some of those demo builds are so fragile that like if you turn the wrong corner or like look a different not intended way, like that whole build just crashes straight up.
Go backwards through the level and it just falls apart.
Yep.
Or whatever.
Yep.
We will see each other again at one point sometime not so soon.
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously we have to. Most definitely. That's the goal. That's the hope. I really want to see all you guys again. Miss you all, and for some people like George, I want to meet you for the first time in person.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It would absolutely be a shame if these physical events went away for good.
Yeah, like there is value in E3, especially like for behind the scenes, getting together in person, pitching a project to a publisher, and all those talks behind the scenes. Like that is invaluable. That is the main like value of E3 because of how just that's on everyone's mind, and everyone gets together for that week. So you have everyone for sure at a single place for a week at least.
Yeah, it brings in the proximity, lowers the hurdles, all that stuff. All that intangible stuff that's kind of hard to measure, quantify. Well, that wraps us up, I think. Here we are, halfway through hour 4 of our podcast. So, marathon session. Thanks, CD, for that's Alexander Seedhouse for joining us for this extra long session, talking about everything from Pokemon to E3 to Final Fantasy and Ariana Grande.
Thanks for putting up with me.
So let's see. All the things I got to talk about to close this thing out. We obviously have the review up for Bravely Default 2. We've got the review up for Steven Universe Unleash the Light. Even though it was published a few weeks ago, obviously it just released this week. We've got the review for Persona 5 Strikers. We've also got a few guides up for Bravely Default 2 and I believe Strikers as well. I wrote up a preview on the Project Strategy demo. We've got a few gameplay snippets up on our YouTube channel. We've got all the Final Fantasy news from the State of Play. We've got all the Pokemon news from the Pokemon Presents and everything else we talked about. You can always visit our website at rpgsite.net. You can visit us, follow us on Twitter at RPG Site. We do have a Discord channel server. If you do go to our website, you can click the link at the top of the page to go there. We're also on Facebook and Instagram under RPG Site. And we hold this podcast every week, seemingly. So if you like this, we'll be back next week with more. So until then, stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to you next time.